Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon. This is John Sundress. Before we get to the show, a couple show notes. I have a YouTube channel under Word Balloon. It's free. I'm trying to reach at least 1,000 subscribers. I'm just over 800. Everybody's been great. I was at 300 when I first started asking about this, and now I'm over 800. I need to hit 1,000. I would like to start doing live chats on a semi-daily basis and involve the Word Balloon audience, but I need to reach 1,000 subscribers before I can start live chatting. So please, it's free. Would you please consider subscribing? And it's only going to mean more content. I've already got video content up there at my Word Balloon YouTube channel. Check it all out. Also, I know commercials can be a pain in the ass. I know I've been talking about this. Please listen to all the commercials, even the older episodes. I know they interrupt about a minute into the show with one more commercial. I'm trying to fix that, but in the meantime, if you could suffer through that, it's one of the ways I get paid at Word Balloon is by listening to all the commercials. It's greatly appreciated. In fact, one more spot right now, and then we'll start the show. Thank you. Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Sundress here. Man, cannot wait to share this one with you. Bryan Hitch, we recorded last Thursday. We had a great epic conversation, so many things we talked about. If you don't know, he has a great story that he co-created with Jason Luthor, and that was Lex Luthor's Year of the Villain. Now, Bryan is modest, and I actually believe him. He's like, look, Jason came up with the script, I just executed it. Yeah, but there's some incredible images there of Lex. It's a multiverse story where Lex in his current iteration, influenced by, is her name Penumbra, one of the monitors, the mother of the monitors. It's kind of alien Lex. Well, he goes off traveling through the multiverse to see other versions of himself, of Luthor, and kind of proves to a young Lex Luthor that being Luthor the villain is inevitable no matter what parallel world you go to. And it's a great it's a great story. It's amazing. The Black Mercy from the Man Who Has Everything story of Superman, the Superman annual that featured Batman and Wonder Woman as well, where Mongul put the Black Mercy plant on Superman, and he remembers his greatest scenario of what his life would have been like if Krypton hadn't exploded. And it's this very sad story that, again, wish fulfillment isn't always what it's cracked up to be. That is reflected in the story as well. Tremendous. And starting tomorrow actually, Batman Grave, a new Warren Ellis, Bryan Hitch collaboration. They let me see the first issue, which is just fantastic. And a great story, great beginning. And what I love about when Hitch and Warren Ellis get together, or really any British team, and they attack an American concept, it always comes from a different point of view. And I think we all see it and appreciate it because, a different, air quotes, culture, slightly different, is telling us what they think of the American hero. And I think that comes through in Batman Grave. We really have a really interesting conversation about that. Plus, there's a range of things that we touch on in this conversation, and it's always fun to talk to Bryan. God, we've only been having these conversations last year and this year, and this is like our third or fourth, and he's always interesting, and I'm really glad, and he's really fast becoming one of those creators that I like to have a nice long conversation with, like Rucka and Bendis, Fraction, and Kelly Sue, Jeff Parker recently, a great example of people that, kick back, and all of a sudden we realize we've been talking for almost 2.5 hours. So I'm really happy to share this one with you. Bryan Hitch on today's Word Balloon. All brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you greatly, League, for your support via Patreon. Patreon.com/wordballoon. If you'd like to subscribe and help out the cause, it's greatly appreciated. I'm closing in on a good number, and the promise of the patrons that if we reach the $1 goal, that they will get Word Balloon episodes without any commercials, just the raw interviews, and enjoy those. But, if you, like I say, Word Balloon is free, but if you want to help out the cause, you can go to patreon.com/wordballoon. Is Word Balloon worth $1 a month to you? Is it worth the price of a comic book a month to you? I hope so. I try to bring you some interesting entertainment in the comic book and pop culture world that you don't find anywhere else. Good deep dives of conversations, and today's episode with Bryan Hitch is a prime example. Thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by Aftershock Comics. Man, I'll tell you, Aftershock just had a great New York Comic-Con. I just checked in with the guys, and I'll tell you, they have great books, and they're doing great. They have a great setup. People like Mitch Halleck, my buddy from Terrificon, was talking to Joe Pruitt. Joe, of course, has his anthology Shock, and Joe and Mike Martz are the editorial leaders that go out and recruit the new creators and the old creators to come up with great Aftershock books. And it's a hell of a roster, man. And I'll tell you, if this was a baseball team, I'd be very happy because they're doing pretty well, man. It's almost like Billy Bean and Moneyball. Remember that Brad Pitt movie and everything? Really interesting creators. People like Marguerite Bennett and Garth Ennis and Phil Hester and Tim Seeley and Cullen Bunn, Stephanie Phillips, Chris Sabella. So many interesting voices at Aftershock, providing us with great books, genre-bending books in a lot of cases. I will be talking to more Aftershock creators in the weeks ahead about their books. You don't have to wait, though. Go to their website. I'm sure you'll find a book that will interest you. You'll find full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on their books and how to order them through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. All right, let's get into it now. Bryan Hitch, a great creator himself, and really interesting thoughts always, and I enjoy our conversations. And he's like, hey, I'm doing this new thing with Warren Ellis, Batman Grave. Do you want to talk about it? I'm like, yeah. Plus, he's been doing great variant covers for Bendis and the Superman books. And also, like I said, this amazing Lex Luthor story that he did with Jason Latour. It's Lex Luthor Year of the Villain one-shot. If you haven't seen it, you will be blown away. And it's one of the things we start talking about initially with Bryan Hitch on today's Word Balloon. Once again, mid-conversation with Bryan Hitch, and we're already in the conversation before we start talking, but it's Bryan as I start to cough up a little bit. Welcome back.
Thanks, John. Should we do a symphony of coughing? A
symphony of phlegm, I would think so, yes.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Bring that one in while I'm drinking a glass of wine. Actually, and you can keep this one if you like, but last year, because, I love fine wines, but my wife bought me a case of a wine I'd been dying to try for a long time. It was stupid price per bottle. I mean, hundreds per bottle.
Wow.
Anyway, but she bought it for me for my birthday. And on my birthday, she says, you have to have a glass. You have to drink some. You've been wanting to try this for years. So pour some out. So I opened it earlier in the afternoon. I decanted it. I let it breathe. All the pompous stuff that goes with the finest of wine tastings. So, and I pour this glass out, and she's watching me. She's taking pictures. She's videoing this, and I swirl the glass around. I sniff it. I look up and I muse at the possible scents I'm getting. Marsh samphire on a spring morning, baby's bottoms on a tarmac road, all this stuff, and I put some in my mouth and I swill it around and I swallow and I breathe in, and my wife looks at me, starts pissing herself laughing at the pomposity of this, which gets me laughing, and I snort the entire mouthful of wine back out through my nose onto the kitchen floor with phlegm, and she's going like, it's that good, right?
Exactly, man.
My whole wine tasting pomposity out the window at that point.
And through your nose, anyway, absolutely, man.
That's my phlegm story.
Absolutely, man. That's funny. Well, it's okay. We'll muddle through, and every now and then I'm going to cut my microphone and give a big hack. But I'm thrilled to have you back, man. Because God, now I'm confused. Did Batman Grave, did it come out this week?
It's out, Wednesday the 9th, so I lose track of dates.
Yeah.
So it's as we're recording this, it's next Wednesday.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
But the Luthor Year of the Villain one-shot that you and Jason Latour came out.
Yeah, that was a couple of weeks back, 3 weeks ago, I think, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, because, man, I just read it this morning, and oh my God, it was just great. And what a great story opportunity, much like your Hawkman run with Robert Venditti, to explore different designs of costumes and moments as these two Luthors travel across the multiverse.
that was very much more in miniature than we got to do with Hawkman. But yeah, I mean, that was very much, I have to say, very much Jason's story. He wrote a full script. He knew what he wanted, and barring a couple of minor incidents when I moved some frames around just so we could get a bigger shot than originally scripted, this was me just kind of drawing what Jason was asking for. So I was very much just the, doing what Jason was asking for in that one, and it was such a nice story to draw. It was effortless from my point of view to do, because Jason had kind of figured it all out. He knew what he wanted, and whilst he wasn't, Alan Moore in his pages and pages description, and for anybody who doesn't know that, famously Alan Moore would write a page or 2 pages of close type just to describe one of 6 panels on a page. So, there was a lot of information there. But in Jason's case, he was very specific, and he knew what he wanted. The pacing was absolutely worked out. So that kind of stuff is easy to do, because it's kind of like the thinking's been done for you to a degree, and you just have to draw the pictures. So it was fun to do, and I'd love to work with Jason again on something a bit more substantial, where we could, play around a lot more. But I'm glad it worked out well. It was certainly nice to work on.
I'm such a fan of his, and always have been from an art standpoint. And then as he began to write, he's terrific. I mean, I think he's got great ideas. I love his creator-owned stuff. I mean, not only what he's done with Southern Bastards with Jason Aaron, but Loose Shoes, I want to say, was a great crime comic that he did. And I mean, I first learned of him when he was working with B. Clay Moore on The Expatriate, a great little spy thing that they never finished. And, it's a shame, but no, that was my first. And then I started to talk to him at shows and got to know him as a guy. I don't know how much one-on-one contact you've had a chance to have with him.
Very few emails, really, because we were both busy on other stuff. So, sure. It was kind of, there was no phone calls, because it was really one of those jobs. The editor called, said, we've got this thing, Jason's going to write it. Are you up for drawing it? And, so there wasn't a lot of kind of interaction, but he seemed happy. He seemed happy with what he was getting. He sent a couple of emails here and there, and there's a few tweets here and there. So it's nice. It's always nice to know that the writer is happy with the work you're doing, because the last thing you want them to do is sort of tweet things about, like, I wrote this really good story, but God, Hitch has really fucked it up. Those are the ones you have to watch for.
Sure.
So.
Well, you didn't fuck it up, man. No, it's great. I got to be honest. I thought that Jason's script really kind of got to the heart of Luthor in a way that, as much as what Scott is doing in Justice League with this changed Luthor, who is under the control of I forget her name now, the Monitor's mother, that is messing with the multiverse and everything.
Right.
But
Perpetua.
Perpetua. Thank you. Yes. But this story, and also just dealing with, alien Luthor or alien influenced Luthor with young Superboy, Silver Age era Luthor right before his series.
I love drawing that first page, and actually when Jason saw the pencils to that, we both said independently of each other to the editor, I'd do a Superboy book with this guy. So
that's great.
But I love it, like a 50s set, proper period, 15-year-old Superboy, because I grew up reading the Kurt Schaffenberger Superboy stuff in the 80s, so, I loved that stuff as a kid. It was as much of a project for me. I used to copy that as much as I copied Kurt Swan's stuff.
I agree, man. It was
so to go into that stuff. It would be an absolute. I mean, it would sell nothing. Nobody would buy it. But
well, us old farts would probably buy it, because I thought the Schaffenberger series absolutely evoked your classic Silver Age Superboy stories, which in a very similar way to the Andy Griffith Show was about, like, even though it was coming out in the 50s and 60s, almost. Well, and again, because of Superman's age, maybe, was really about, like, the 30s and 40s Smallville.
Yeah, exactly. That's quite right, yeah. Because those adults that were making those shows are talking about their childhoods 20 years earlier, at least.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's, have you ever read, Elliot Maggins' Last Son of Krypton?
Oh, yeah,
novel?
I have. Yeah,
and then also, Smallville. For people who, and I'm sure I've said it before on the show. Elliot has since re-released both of his Superman novels that he made around the time of the first Richard Donner movie, and they're great. But I really love Last Son of Krypton in particular because there are some great flashback scenes of early Smallville and Chief Parker, the policeman, and it's terrific. And yeah, man, even in those handful of pages in your book and stuff, now you brought back that era. And yeah, I got no problem with John Kent, and I like the idea that Bryan has done in terms of putting him now with the Legion. And I know you've done your share of drawing John with the Legion recently and everything.
Well, it was just that big cover we did, which was a hoot. Yeah,
that's a great cover though, man. And yeah,
have you ever read the It's Superman book by Tom DeHaven?
That's a great book too. It really is. Yeah,
that's another one that gets that kind of Smallville thing too. Yep. It's just
absolutely. No, they're terrific. And again, it's I get it, and you move along, but no, that Superboy period is such a great period of stories. Both the fantastic kind of more Weisinger classic, Superboy with a bug head or problems with red kryptonite or whatever. But it's great. And also, again, having this character in your story with luthor, the young boy that becomes that Silver Age Luthor, and just this idea that as you travel through the multiverse, the different iterations and choices that each Luthor makes, the affected main Luthor that was affected by Perpetua and everything. It's like Luthor's inevitable. It's a life path that you've got no choice, but eventually it's going to come down to this.
Well, again, I can't really take a lot of credit for that because I was literally, that was literally Jason's script. He's an artist and a good storyteller, so he knew kind of the pictures he wanted, and he didn't have to kind of give me massive art direction, but his beats were all worked out, so there wasn't really a lot I could do except draw what he was asking for, which was exactly what was needed. So I was happy to be along for the ride for that one.
Well, but and again, I understand what you're saying, and yes, it is Jason's story. But like a good cameraman, man, you're carrying the visual acting, and I got that innocence or open-mindedness initially that you need in young Luthor as he's being taken across the multiverse, but also the various iterations. And really, I'm looking at one of the last pages where Alexander Luthor of the Crisis on Infinite Earths, the hero Luthor, is trying to explain, or a version that could be that hero Luthor.
Yeah.
The various iterations, it's funny, we mentioned Alan Moore, of course, the Black, is it called the Black Orchid?
The Black Orchid,
yes, which is one of the most, God, that story, I've talked to Dave Gibbons about that story and how much I love it. And again, the acting that Dave had to draw as well. And what you think should be Superman's perfect life is very different. For the Man Who Has Everything is obviously the name of the story, and they made the Justice League episode that was based on that story as well. And it's such a great, sad story of, a Superman that lives on Krypton and has to live this different life. But you've got this great Black Orchid, the Alexander Luthor character makes a tea of the Black Orchid leaves. Yeah. And so he's able to enjoy all these different alternate reality possibilities. And you got Luthor as the Flash, you've got him as Orion, Shazam, Hawkman, of course, Brainiac, In Love. Yeah. I'm looking at the whole thing, Dr. Fate.
And I know. That one was, to be fair, pretty much me, because Jason just said lots of different Luthors.
Yeah, man. No, but but Luthor adds all these different heroes and everything, and it's terrific. And again, it just like those great moments of the 70s What If Marvel book, where every now and then they would just kind of throw up a mishmash of images of different alternate universes and stuff, and it's like, oh man, give me a book of that. I would love to see Lex Luthor as the Flash. or
Well,
as Shazam, you know.
Luthor's a fascinating character, and I say this is purely my kind of point of view because, you know, I grew up reading the classic Lex Luthor was the bad guy, Superman was the good guy. But, you know, it always seemed to me, even as a kid, that Batman's archenemy in the Joker was an embodiment of just evil for the sake of evil. Whereas when you get to somebody like Luthor, I always think that Luthor's one choice away from being a hero, and that he just keeps making those bad choices because when it comes down to it, is the other side. You know, if you're looking at Superman and Luthor as aspects of humanity, Superman is the best human you can be.
Sure.
And he tries, and he's all too human, but he tries, you know, and he works hard at being the best human you can be. And that self-sacrifice that he puts into that, because it's not about how good he can make his own life, it's how good he can make your life. Whereas Luthor's other choice, the other side of that dice, is how good can I make my life? And I'm not prepared to sacrifice because I want my life to be better than yours. And it's the other side of that coin toss of humanity. So they're literally a choice apart, Superman and Luthor. And I find that dynamic far more fascinating, you know, as a creator than I do the Batman Joker story. Because, you know, when it comes down to it, it's good versus evil in the purest sense. There's no middle ground between Batman and Joker.
Sure.
Unless of course you go with the idea that Bruce himself is so deranged, he's only one choice away from being the Joker. And that's fascinating in itself, but that's not how I see Bruce, or Batman. And when it comes down to it, I love the aspect of Luthor being that single choice away from being a person as good as Superman, and an effort away from being as good as Superman. And I think sometimes that's why Luthor hates Superman, is because to some degree he shines a light on everything Luthor hates about himself as much as anything else. But I think it's a lovely dynamic, and I think that's possibly why, for me, they're the greatest hero and the greatest villain.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and also I've appreciated the evolution of Luthor over the years, what Marv Wolfman did in the 80s. But then, honestly, I really think Jeff Johns gave him, as you say, too, Luthor wants to be, at least in this current iteration, well, I shouldn't speak as far as his Perpetua persona, but what I liked about what Jeff brought to the table was that, yeah, Luthor, for very selfish reasons, was going to be the savior of humanity.
Yeah.
And then Superman showed up. But again, it's that twinge of wanting to do it to get the credit and to be wants the glory. I mean, Superman obviously much more humble about it, but, hey, we're all in this together, that kind of thing. And whereas Luthor was like, wait a minute, I was going to solve the world's problems, and then he showed up. And then even further, I loved, I suppose it excuses Luthor's selfishness, but there was that one great issue of Man of Steel. Yeah, I want to say it was called Man of Steel, but it was a Luthor series, and it was Azzarello and I believe Lee Bermejo. And there's this great lunch conversation between Lex and Bruce Wayne. And he's just like, he's an alien. How can we trust him? And that's what I thought was missing, and they should have leaned on it more on the Batman-Superman movie. Because as opposed to...
he's not one of us, yeah. I mean, Lex and Bruce, to a degree, are the same, almost. You know, they're both billionaires. They're both making their impact. They're kings of their cities to a degree.
From Luthor's perspective, that he sees a potential ally in Bruce.
Yeah.
And
that Superman is not one of them. He's something that, you just can't trust him.
Exactly.
He's not us.
Yes.
You know, he's not. There's so much undercurrent in a conversation like that. Whether you want to take that as a racial or a status or a social, kind of slur on Superman Clark. And actually, and this also goes back, I think, or at least you can feed it back, I think, into the origins of Superman as a character who was the protector of the underdog. We're talking about Jewish immigrants who were living in poor conditions in large cities, and Superman, in those terms, as originally conceived, was the guy who would fight the landlord for you who was trying to get you kicked out of your apartment.
Yes.
He'd beat him up and he'd chuck him out a window and catch him on the way down. That's, I think that's an element of Superman that gets a little, unfortunately for me, forgotten, that he's that character too. He's not, Superman's always written as this guy who just is benign almost, and he's not. He's capable of being angry. The fact that his anger's held in check and that you don't want it ever to be out of check, I think is a fundamental part of his character, and it's his choice, his effort, and his willingness to be the kind of character we see him as. But he's still human. He gets angry. He gets seriously pissed off with people, especially people who take advantage of the unfortunate and the less fortunate. And, and I think that's the fundamental part of his relationship with Luthor, is Luthor is one of those people who will ride roughshod over a mountain of the dead to get to what he wants if it achieves what his goals are. And he sees that as being a relatively benign position because, he's owed that because he's worked hard to get it. And to be fair, that's a whole part of modern day humanity. It's always been a part of humanity. The people that lead, whether that's in money or in war, in history, the great leaders of history, they're not nice people. And they never were nice people. They certainly weren't on the side of humanity. They weren't out to make everybody's lives better. That's a modern conceit. It's not an ancient conceit. It's not really part of humanity. Luthor, I think, represents, actually, to be honest, the ultimate of the reality of humanity. And Superman represents this aspect of humanity that is the ideal of humanity. And I think that's another reason why they're just fundamentally so amazing characters to work on, especially when they work together in a story.
Agreed. I do want to ask you before we move on to a different subject, with the Joker movie coming out this week and what you've said about the Joker, I agree with your idea of his characterization. And the movie's already, we're speaking on Thursday, the day before it opens here in the States. I don't know about if by you it also opens this weekend.
I don't know.
Are you interested in seeing it? Are you going to see it?
I'm not, and that's not because I want to be critical of the movie, because I haven't seen it. I've seen the trailers, and that's it. But I had this kind of issue to a degree with Gotham when it came out, is that it seemed to me with Gotham there was only one way that was going to go, which was with the descent of people into inhumanity and evil, and I can't imagine that. And from the reviews I've read, I'm probably right, is that I don't think the Joker is a character seeking redemption or looking for redemption or a character who is unfortunately forced into becoming this unredeemable character. I think it's all going to be down to choices that character has to make, whether by plot or design or whatever, that ends up becoming this character of chaos and evil. And I'm not interested in seeing that. That's not my kind of... I'm fascinated to a degree that they've been able to make it, and I applaud the fact that they've taken, the choices they have, and they've clearly made a movie that's both unsettling and, interesting to a great number of people, and that's fantastic. But it's not a movie I confess to be interested in seeing, so I'm probably not going to see it.
I agree with again your feelings about the Joker, and I feel the same way. And in fact, I think it makes him more dangerous that he is purely psychotic and isn't a Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver or a Michael Douglas in Falling Down, where I understand where he's coming from.
That I'd forgotten that, but you're absolutely right. Falling Down, you forget that's the man who made Batman and Robin. It's insane when you compare those two movies.
Schumacher, I didn't realize did both. I didn't realize he did Falling Down.
It was Joel Schumacher. I mean, you give Joel Schumacher that material, and he made Falling Down, which I know you think, get that man a Batman movie, and you get Batman and Robin. It's okay. I misjudged that.
In recent years, I've heard Schumacher be interviewed. I have a little more sympathy for him because he said he would be in the middle of developing the movie, or even shooting the movie, he said, and they would walk in with a toy and say, we need a scene with, this goofy, car or whatever. And so, again, the powers that be, I think, dictated where the Batman movies post-Burton went. And even to a degree, I think, in the second Burton movie, frankly. And it's a shame. But
I don't think I don't think one could unfairly say that Schumacher was making the movies he made because they were a natural follow-on from the Burton movies. Because the Burton movies were not dark action, crime noir, detective thriller, action movies.
Yeah.
They were gothic pantomimes.
Yes, very much so.
And when you follow that natural progression through, you do end up, unfortunately, at Batman and Robin.
Sure.
It isn't too big a stretch to go from Batman in '89 to Batman and Robin in the '90s. I've said this to you. I've said this every time. I think Batman is probably the most malleable character DC owns.
Agreed.
Because he will survive almost anything you do to him. But and it's one of the reasons that I am actually genuinely looking forward to the Matt Reeves movies, because I think Matt Reeves is a solid storyteller, he's a good filmmaker, and I think I actually genuinely think Robert Pattinson is a good casting choice too.
I agree with all of that. Yeah.
I'm really excited to see what story they want to tell with this character over maybe 1 to 3 movies, and to see what kind of world they will build. Affleck was a good casting choice too. Unfortunately, he was just given shitty material.
Agreed.
So
completely agree. And same thing can be said too for as Henry Cavill with Superman.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, because I actually think you could have given Cavill, the Superman the movie script, and he'd have pulled it off.
Absolutely.
I think I don't think there's a problem at all with his. I mean, he looks the part. I think I think Chris Reeve has slightly more charisma than Cavill, but again, I wonder how much of that is the director's choice. Because actors, however good they are, if the material is poor and the direction is poor, then you're going to get a poor result. So, and I've been on Twitter and been vilified on Twitter by people who don't even follow me because I've dared criticize Zack Snyder's movies. And, I don't have an issue with Zack Snyder as a person. I'm sure he's a lovely guy, but given the material he's put out, I don't agree with his interpretation of Superman particularly. And I know there are many who do, and I don't have an issue with them. I'm telling them they can't like the movie. I'm just saying I don't like the movies, but...
in a smaller scale, I had the same problem. Some podcasters got very angry at me for not liking the Superman movies, the Batman Superman movie, Justice League, or Suicide Squad. and I just feel like, it's just I don't care for those. It's interesting comparing Jared Leto's Joker to what they're going to do with Joaquin Phoenix too, because I think they were both equally dangerous, and but there is a different take. The one thing about this Joker movie, and I'll be interested, and again, we're talking before it came out, and I do intend to see it. There's always the fear that what is on the film becomes the story that everybody then moves forward with. And got even to the point, I remember when the Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies came out, we got the organic web shooters as opposed to Peter, the high school genius, coming up with the web shooters and designing them. And they kind of went with it for a little while in the comics. And we were all complaining. I don't... It's interesting. I know that Jeff has set up with Jason Fabok this 3 Jokers story that they are working on. Yeah. And I'll be very interested to see how that comes out. I think that's intriguing. To do that with the character is an interesting choice. But I kind of, my one fear is that, Falling Down Joker is going to become, if it's a hit, the public conscious. And right now, this is obviously a very 50-50 movie, but I have seen some decent critiques of the movie as much as I've seen people who have problems with this new Joker movie.
But the thing is, I think that will only retain its position as the definitive Joker until the next one, because,
True.
I mean, how many we had Jack Nicholson, and we had that extraordinary Heath Ledger performance. And actually, I didn't have an issue with Jared Leto's Joker. I just thought the material was poor. I didn't think he was bad. I actually thought it was very good, actually. And it was an interesting take, and I would have liked to have seen more. You know, if that had been a Batman movie, I'd love to have seen Jared Leto genuinely become the Joker rather than just be a cameo performance.
Oh, God, yeah. That's the missed opportunity of that film. You've got all these street heroes with the one exception, well, El Diablo, and I forget the woman's name that is half bad, half good. But it's like, what is Harley Quinn and her sledgehammer, tree stump going to do against an immortal god? It's like, no, give them a street level villain, and especially somebody like the Joker. That's where a much more intriguing Suicide Squad story could be told. It didn't make sense to me.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how the new Suicide Squad shapes up with James Gunn. He's a very good filmmaker.
Absolutely.
And a good storyteller. So.
Yeah.
And he's dealt with an ensemble cast very well. So it'll be very interesting to see how that one functions, I think.
Were you a fan of the book back in the day?
Yeah, I was. The John Ostrander one.
Yes.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah,
I mean, that was very much my reading period as I turned pro as well. So, it's all part of that kind of classic DC stuff to me. And I've worked with John in the past as well.
Oh, no kidding. That's great, man. I love John. John's a great guy. He spent a lot of years here in Chicago, both writing comics and also doing theater here and everything. And Munden's Bar, that hangout that Grimjack is in all the time, is based on a real bar that was not too far from one of my first radio stations where I worked, and I used to go to that bar.
Interesting.
Oh, it was great.
I've set something in a Chicago bar by
yes, you did. I love that place, the Red Lion. Yeah, I know it well.
That's the one. Yeah,
absolutely, man.
Yeah, my colorist then, Paul Mounce, is based in Chicago. So I said to him, I don't know why. We just wanted a different city from New York. So I said to him, we're going to set this in Chicago. Can you find me a bar? And he said, I know the very one. So he went and took pictures for me so I could use them as reference for that fight scene. So I don't know whether it's drummed up any business or not. I doubt it. But
Giant Man versus Captain America, right there outside the Red Lion,
right behind the bar. Yeah,
dude. I told Mounts again because he's a local guy. I told him that too. I'm like, oh my god, the Red Lion. He goes, yeah. I told Brian about that. And it's funny. Among the things that the Red Lion was known for, a James Bond kind of fan club, which would do meetings there because Raymond Benson and I forget the other later Bond novelists were both Chicago guys, and they would come to these Bond meetings occasionally and happily talk about their novels, and everybody would, just like a good Comic-Con, everyone would discuss James Bond, and that was happening at the Red Lion back in the day.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, John, I'm in on my own tonight, so I'm having to kind of police the dogs and the kids that haven't gone to bed. So.
It's all good, man. Don't worry about it. It happens on a lot of these kind of podcasts. Brian always has to watch for his kids and stuff like that. It's cool. Bendis. But anyway, back to our discussion.
Actually, I'm doing a few covers for their book at the moment, actually, which is great fun.
Oh my god! Hey, absolutely. Well, actually, as we talked last time, Brian will throw those up. Bendis will throw those up and stuff. Even I think before the solicits come out.
I know he did. I sent him. I did a couple and they weren't supposed to come out till next year. But I'm well ahead on those because Eddie Choi, who handles all the variant covers at DC, so he commissions a part of variant covers for different books. He said, "Do you want to do the variant covers of Superman for a while?" I said, "Shit, yeah!" Any excuse to draw Superman. So I decided to do this series of. The first would be a series of covers based around his powers, because it was Eddie emailed me while I was on holiday, and I was doing a little doodle while I was on holiday on art paper of Superman using his heat vision and blasting like chunks of building out, looking. And so it was a real dynamic shot, and I was just doing it for fun. And Eddie emailed, he said, "So do you want to do these Superman covers?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." He said, "The first one, it doesn't have to be story related, actually. Let's just do an iconic shot." I said, "How about this?" And I took a photograph of what I was working on, just for fun. And he said, "Yeah, that'll work. That'll be it." So, that was a bit of easy money.
There's already speculation about this December issue that's coming up in Superman called Truth.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if you had done that cover that I saw where
I'm doing it now as a matter. Well, no, not that cover. Ivan's done the covers for those.
Okay, so that was Ivan. Yeah, Ivan Hayes.
But
yeah.
There's a follow up to that I'm doing the covers for.
Interesting.
as well as the variant covers. I'm the regular variant cover artist from, I think, January, issue 19. I do all the regular variants for a while, but I'm also doing covers for something else related to that issue. Yeah.
Well,
so I cannot. They will all crucify me if I tell you.
I understand. I totally understand.
But I just say I read Bryan's scripts for that the other day, and they're just fantastic. I mean, I really envy Ivan getting to draw that level of material for a character like Superman, because it's just so perfectly well judged, and the dialogue and the character work is just phenomenal. It's great. So,
no, I mean, honestly, the entire run, I really think Bryan, has such a great handle on Superman and this family dynamic of having to raise John and making room for Lois in her career. It's he's hitting all the notes that I was hoping for, because Superman's private life is as interesting as whatever big bads you can throw up against him.
Oh yeah. And that's the stuff I would love to draw. I mean, it's interesting reading in one of the scripts Bendis wrote. This is the Washington Post newsroom. Ivan, use this as your And the thing is, I've used that for Superman's Daily Planet thing twice now. Once in Justice League and once in the Lex Luthor thing. Although you don't see very much of it, but there's a shot of an old Clark Kent, which is the old Kurt Swan Clark Kent, with the dead orchid on the floor.
Yes.
Just that shot. But that's supposed to be that. I drew that as the old Kurt Swan Clark. I use the Washington Post newsroom because it's the best looking newsroom. So it's really funny that we're looking at the same materials for this stuff. But I would love to draw that stuff, because I think that stuff is, for me, drawing comics, drawing a shot of Clark in the newsroom. In fact, one of my favorite shots of my JLA run is Clark and Lois talking in the newsroom in issue 1 of JLA.
Uh-huh.
And,
yep.
The pencils to that are for my money, some of the best I'd done with that kind of material. But I love that kind of environment and those kind of characters. And I love drawing the suits and the clothing and the personal and the body language, because I think his body language is Clark, even though Lois knows Clark is Superman. I still think the body language is different.
Yes.
And to play with that, I just enjoy that material, and that comes from me being from the ground floor up a Superman fan. This is why I draw comics, because of Superman, and I'm never going to move away from it. Even if I never do a run on the Superman character, the reason I do what I do and why I'm interested in it at the various levels I am is purely because of two things: reading Superman and watching Superman the movie. I mean, both of those things. I mean, I read the comics, and we got annuals at Christmas over here, which were kind of hardback reprints of other stuff in A4 size. And that was my first introduction to Superman at about 6 years old, in about 76. And then I started getting the Superman comics. Because my local newsagents, the only newsagents in the town, only stocked DC comics. So I got into the Superman stuff through that, but it was always Superman. Superman, I don't care who drew it, the Superman books always came first, because that was the character. And that was my go-to character, my entry-level character, and that's never left me. And I've thought about it a lot. I've thought about it a great deal. I've read a lot about it. And I would love to draw a definitive run on the character, or a definitive project about the character. But at the same time, it is why I do what I do, and I do it the way I do it, because Kurt Swan, I didn't realize this until years later, how much of an influence Kurt Swan, it had on me, because Kurt Swan seems unremarkable when you compare with people like, Neil Adams and John Byrne and so on. But actually, what he did was, he drew character, always character first. People, wore real clothing, and they lived in real environments. It was a real apartment building. It was a train going to Smallville. It was a real car. It was New York backgrounds. I mean, I'm not talking about the big, because nobody really had the patience to draw, if Superman was flying over a city, a very detailed down shot of a city like New York.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, on the ground level, on the street level, it wasn't a made-up city. It was something that felt real, and all of those things played into that naturalism and that realism played hugely into why I kind of moved in the direction that I did, and that was always that underpinning was kind of just hammered home by 3 years later, seeing Superman the movie. Many times, every weekend for years, because it brought that character exactly as I read it in the comics. Because as that great nod and wink to the camera as he flies over just before the final credits, But Kurt Swan drew that. Almost every issue ended with Superman turning to the camera and giving you a wink.
Absolutely.
It was just it really nailed exactly the character that I'd been reading, and again that cinematic storytelling that they were able to do on the movie, the wide angles, the David Lean Smallville,
Yes.
all of that stuff just went in the mixing pot, and it's been, and I didn't realize till years later, and looking back when people say who influenced you the most, and you go through the obvious ones like first Alan Davis, then through him you get to Neil Adams and Gil Kane, and
sure.
Kevin Nolan was always an influence on the illustration. People like Otomo on storytelling. When Japanese comics started mixing it in with Americans in the late 80s,
sure.
You get all that stuff. But then actually when you go back to the roots, you start talking about obviously Garcia Lopez and Jerry Ordway, who were huge parts of my Jerry Ordway's All-Star Squadron was as much a part of my childhood as Kurt Swan's Superman was. But really at the heart of it, you go back to your first principles. My first principle was Kurt Swan's Superman. And without that having that effect on me that made me just kind of that sense of wonder and joy, and reality too. I don't think I would have been anywhere near the artist I was without Kurt Swan being, in my foundations. People like him, because, everybody talks about Neil Adams' Batman and Joe Maparas' Batman, and I love both of those things, but my Batman was Don Newton's. So
that's cool. Yeah.
So, Kurt Swan and Don Newton, I think, are about my base level foundational DNA. So.
That's excellent, man. And we'll get to more Batman talk when we talk about Batman Grave. But what you said about the Daily Planet, I couldn't agree more. I also think that it's funny. I've talked about this with Jeff Loeb. The black and white George Reeves Superman show was such a Daily Planet show, and I loved Clark Kent, investigative reporter. And I think what we got on that 50s show was very basic because it was made for a kid's audience. But I used to love when he would get in the face of Inspector Henderson, and the police would throw up their usual public relations smokescreen, and Clark Kent would be like, "No, don't give me that crap, Bill. We know it's not like that. Now give me the straight story." "All right, Kent." Or the moments of Jimmy and Lois being in trouble, and it wasn't, "God, I wish Superman was here." It was always, "I wish Mr. Kent were here. He'd know what to do." And I think that evolved as Swan's art evolved and the storytelling evolved in the 70s and 80s. Mm-hmm. And you'd get these great, like you said, and what you got to draw in terms of Superman and Lois at the Planet, where Superman, there's no pretense when he's Clark Kent. He's just being him. And he doesn't have to worry about projecting a strong image or anything like that. And you really get these great, deep character moments. And to treat myself for a birthday one year, managed to find on eBay this one Clark and Lois page that Tex Blaisdell inked for Kurt Swan.
Oh, Tex Blaisdell! I love that combination.
Yeah, and it's them at the United States Capitol, and at the Capitol they're kind of known in the cafeteria of the Capitol for selling this white bean soup, this cream of and they have this discussion about it, and it's like, "What are you eating over there?" "Oh, it's what the and again it's this like little teaching moment in the middle of this Superman story, and they tell the story of, this one congressman loved it and declared it should always be in the cafeteria every day available.
That's very Julius Schwartz. Julie Schwartz loved to have a fact in every book. Yeah, I mean, They took the piss out of that in the Mad magazine to a degree, where they used to run these kind of scientific factoids. And my favourite of that was, although the Earth, although the Moon is a quarter the size of the Earth, it is in fact further away.
Sure, or flashbacks, of course, has become kind of a running joke going back to when Julie was editing The Flash and everything. No,
right.
It's great stuff, man. And again. No, and I'm glad you mentioned that in your Luthor story, because absolutely, man. No, I love that moment where there's Clark as an old man just sitting there at the planet and everything, and with the Black Orchid at his feet. No, it was great. I'm telling you, I love Clark Kent, and that's all I'll say about that. But moving on, let's talk a bit about Batman Grave. Great issue, and again, and of course, it's a great issue. When you and Warren get together, it's always literally an event. But I'm really thank you for letting me see it before the people get a chance to see it. I love your designs on Batman's costume to begin with, and I think they're very ornate in a good way, and it's an evolution of what we've been getting in the last few years.
Well, also it continues to evolve. Like issue 4 features a slightly different version of the Batman suit. The idea is that he has. Oh, we said this last time. Mission-specific suits.
Yes.
We won't get to there's no disco Batman, and Arctic Batman. But there are times when he needs something more than the spandex. It's not spandex. We always assume it's a relatively sculpted armored costume.
Yes.
But there are going to be times when he's going to need something slightly more robust, and this is a lovely line in issue 4 where he's in a more robust suit, and there's on the headset to Alfred, having located something he needs to locate and to take down. And Alfred says, what are you going to do, sir? And Batman says, overcompensate massively. I just think that's just great. And then there's a 14-page continuous fight scene between Batman and 4 guys in an apartment lounge. So
wow.
That's really hard to actually do. It's the hardest thing I've done in years, because you have to not just figure out that just work with the location and try to keep reestablishing position and location of people, but there's also the individuals. When you punch one guy and he goes away for a second, but you can't just leave him out for 5 panels because the timing doesn't work. So you have to then constantly reestablish everybody's position and body postures and reactions every time, so that it's very hard to pull off, actually. And it was a lot more work than I thought it was going to be, but I think it worked out pretty well. The storytelling I'm very pleased with on that one. It just, beat to beat to beat, it just works out pretty well. I think it's a bit like shooting a movie, that one.
I bet. What issue is that going to? Is that also in that issue 4?
That's all issue 4. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
It's this is a really interesting story.
Yes.
As I said, it's a long form story. So, Warren has got this kind of game. I mean, I know what the overall story is. I'm not going to say what it is,
sure.
But I know what the story is overall. But I don't know issue to issue what I'm going to get from Warren in terms of how he wants to express this chapter of that story. So it's always a pleasure when the script comes in, because it's never what I quite expect it to be. I've just started working on issue 5, and it's not what I was expecting after issue 4. So, again, it gets me to shift gears, which is always fun. Because there's things to do with issue 5 that I haven't got to do yet with Batman, actually. So it's interesting. It's a constant exploration for me of Batman as a character, because we're kind of divorced somewhat from continuity. This isn't regular monthly Batman continuity. So when we do Arkham Asylum, we are dealing with Mr. Arkham as well himself, because he's founded the asylum. So we don't actually have to have the continuity of the regular Batman comics. This is a thing on its own. It's like White Knight. So
sure.
It very much stands on its own. It'll be a long-term evergreen collection. But at the same time, I think it works really well as chapters. certainly, I mean, issue 1 is an interesting one because I drew issue 1 before I did Hawkman, then I did Hawkman, and some other stuff as well, including the Luthor, and then, you know, I've carried on with Batman afterwards, because Warren got sidetracked by several seasons of Castlevania for Netflix.
Yes, I remember you saying this. Go on.
So I drew issue 1 and then had to put that aside. In issue 1, I got to establish Gotham, Batman's look to a degree, the Batcave, Wayne Manor, and so on. But then suddenly that was all on hold, and I had to draw Hawkman. And then I had to come back to Batman. The script started coming after Hawkman. But it doesn't feel like I've actually had to kind of skip a beat, because the thing is, I've wanted to do Batman for decades. And I've had ideas about how to do Batman for decades visually. So when Warren writes a fight scene, says he hits him, he kicks him, and so on, it's great to have the beat-to-beat-to-beat direction, but at the same time, I know how I want Batman to fight, and I know it's going to be, to me, mostly feet and elbows, because they're the hardest things, you know, because he's not following Marquis of Queensberry rules here. This isn't a tournament. He's going to take you down as quickly and efficiently as possible, and as brutally as possible, because he doesn't want you getting up again. So, you know, he's not going to kill you, but he doesn't mind putting you in hospital for 6 months. You know, so
I like the gauntlets as well, because the gauntlets, much like the Nolan movies, you know, have the bat wings on them, and they seem more like armor, and you know, and I thought that was a nice touch too visually.
Well, obviously, if somebody's going to have a knife fight or, you know, whatever, then, but also if what you're using as your weapons are your fists, your forearms, your feet, your head, they will be the armored parts of you, the heaviest parts of you, you know, because that's what you're using them as weapons. Sure. So they have to be heavy and they have to be hard, and you have to have knuckle dusters on your knuckles.
Yes.
And you've got to protect yourself as well, because you've got to basically bludgeon people into oblivion on a nightly basis. So you know, you don't want to be coming home with relentless bruises and not being able to kind of write your name or sign your $1 million checks, because your hands overly bruised. Sure. You know, so
also
some of this is just logic. You know, that you think, you know, you don't have to have a massively armored bodysuit if he's an aggressive, you know, fighter, and what he's fighting with are these armored forearms, fists, and feet. You know, so you go with the boots, and you go with the gauntlets, and you go with a solid helmet piece, because they are what he's going to use the most.
No, I get it, and also it's funny when you zoomed in on his knuckles and those knuckle dusters, as you're calling them, and stuff. I almost wondered. I remember some of those giant Treasury Edition Batman things, and they would really get into the utility belt. And this is before the pouches, when they were kind of more test tube pill kind of.
They were, and they actually managed to fit a batarang.
Yes, and I almost wondered if in the knuckle bumps, if he had sensors or some little gadget that was waiting to be, you know, popped out, or was whatever.
If this was pre-86, then that's exactly what those things. It would have had a miniature crime lab in each gauntlet.
Yes, hilarious, man. You're right. And then Mazzucchelli gave us the pouches and stuff.
I know, but I love. But again, that's a practical aspect. Sure. Where you think, you know, there's a military aspect to Batman's costume as well. I mean, yes, it's a costume. It's a thing designed to inspire fear, but at the same time, it has to have practical elements too. Like I said, the gloves, the boots, the, you know, whatnot, and even the cape. You know, I try to kind of, you know, draw that in a way that doesn't make it too ornate all the time, except when you need it to be. You know, on a wide shot. But you know, in battles, you've got to kind of keep this thing somewhat restrained in terms of visuals. At least I think so, because with what we're trying to do is represent him, that he is, underneath all that stuff, still a human being. He's not superpowered. Sure. And it's going up against people who are kind of jacked up on various drugs that make them enhanced, you know, more durable, stronger, and so on. then he's going to have to work really hard and take a hell of a lot of punishment to get to the end of that fight scene. So with him, it's visually completely different from things like Hawkman and Superman, in terms of how you deal with his visual body language, if you like, his martial body language. And that's one of the things I love about this stuff is you get these characters are all so different. Whether if you're drawing the Flash in a fight scene, or Superman in a fight scene, or Batman in a fight scene, even Wonder Woman, they're so different.
Sure.
They are.
Yes.
If you think about them, the language and the physical language you use and the visual language you would use each of these characters is so different. It's what's so fascinating about it. And actually, that's also conversely one of the problems. And I didn't realize I was going to have it till I started writing and drawing Justice League. But
interesting. Yeah. All the different styles,
Yeah, you have all of that, and you just don't have the room to do it. You don't.
Wow.
Because you have to go, the group fights, the group reacts, the team does this. And Batman in that setting is not Batman in the setting of a Batman comic. So what I'm drawing with Batman's Grave is not how I would approach or have approached Batman before, and the only other times I've approached him before have been in Justice League or JLA.
Yeah.
Even though I'm pretty much drawing the same costume I've always drawn Batman in since I came to DC, it's a very different physical and visual language I'm having to use for it. So, it's fascinating to actually work through this stuff because it's such a different book, so different from Hawkman, it's so different from Justice League. It's an education in a way. Even though I've thought about this stuff for decades, many decades. When you get to work with the character, you can't just throw everything you've already ever thought of at the character. You have to think, what's the story asking for? Then work through those logical ideas you've had about it and how it would function as a story visually. But it's giving me a whole level of things to explore that I've never done before. So, that's always what you want in a job, isn't it? You don't want to be constantly repeating yourself, or you want to be constantly looking for kind of the next challenge or the next idea, and not just drawing the same shit over and over again. And I have done a lot of the same shit over and over again, because once I started drawing, cities being destroyed in 1999 and 1998 with Authority, Ultimate's just slightly different, but nonetheless, the language I've developed in both of those books is what I've done ever since. When Warren and I did this 10-page Authority story a couple of years ago for the anniversary, Warren said, it was fascinating having to go back into that mindset and see if I could recreate it. I said, Warren, I have been drawing this same shit for 20 years. You could have written anything and it would have looked the same, because I have been drawing the same stuff, and that's partly what led to this, really, is that conversation, because, we wanted to find something else that I could draw, bring all of those ideas about cinematic storytelling and beat-to-beat-to-beat storytelling, and real-world storytelling and human storytelling and characterization and all that stuff, and see if we could bring some different kind of action comic to bear, for me anyway. And that's kind of what's happened. That's kind of why this all came out. So, with Authority only happened because Warren couldn't stand the idea of me not doing something after Stormwatch. He was going to be, his book after Stormwatch was Planetary.
Yes.
And I was supposed to do something with, and I probably shouldn't be this unpolite, but I'm going to be, but I was supposed to be doing something with Scott Lobdell at Wildstorm afterwards. And Warren just called me and said, Scott Lobdell, he said, I don't care. I haven't got time for it. I'm going to write you a book so you don't have to do that.
I understand.
And that was the Authority.
Wow.
So, and I'm sure Warren is going to hate the fact that I put this out there now, and it looks, Scott Lobdell, I'm sure he's a lovely person, and all of that, but it was Warren's reaction to me having to do,
something he felt that wasn't up to your standards, or not standards, but your quality and everything. Listen, and I'll say this, I've met Scott Lobdell. I've had him on the show. I was not a New Mutants person, so I kind of missed his, X-Men glory years. And in fact, the guys from iFanboy introduced me to Scott in San Francisco when we were all together. And I'm like, oh, what do you do? And they're like, oh my God, man, he's like one of the big X-Men writers. I said, oh man, well that was kind of my blind spot in the 90s. I wasn't reading much, so I missed it. And I got to be honest, he had a couple interesting ideas with Superman. I think creating that character, the Kryptonian character Hell, I thought was kind of interesting. For the most part, I haven't enjoyed his work. I wasn't a big Red Hood and the Outlaws fan. I'm sure they're out there. And I had no problem with everyone kind of got on his ass for sexifying Firestorm again, or was it not Firestorm? From the Titans, the orange-skinned woman.
Oh yeah, Coriander.
Yeah, Coriander. Yeah, Starfire, I believe. And and everyone's like, "Oh man, she's way too sexy." I'm like, "Well, I don't know, man. I remember Wolfman and Perez. She was pretty sexy in bed with Dick Grayson." Yeah,
she was wearing a very, very small metal bra and knickers through that whole series.
Yeah.
And we as teens just appreciated the hell out of that.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I was a college kid and I appreciated it. Absolutely, man. So I'm like, I don't know what the arguments are, but that said, I really haven't enjoyed a lot of Scott's DC work. I'm shrugging right now. What can I say? And, so anyway, moving on. We've picked on poor Scott Lobdell enough. He's not here to defend himself. But But anyway, my point was that my two occasions of working with Warren on a protracted project is that it's been a reaction to my kind of saying I'm getting this stuff. I don't want to do this stuff. I want to do this stuff. And Warren's for all his bluff and bluster and his public personality, he's the sweetest of men. So, and he's been a lovely chap, and whenever I've hit a block at some point, he's always a person to talk to, and he's lovely. He's always so helpful. He's such a nice guy. That's great.
And this is the Batman's grave is him being a nice guy and writing me something that he didn't have time to write, which is why it's not out a year ago, because it should have been done by now, but he didn't really have time to do it. So. And there's not to kind of, and I don't want to do that, denigrate the work we did on Hawkman. I had a hell of a great time working with Robert on Hawkman.
Great run, man.
But again, that was one of those serendipitous things where because we couldn't do Batman because Warren was so busy, we couldn't go from issue 1 to 2. Hawkman came up, and so we did that instead, and that was a great year. I enjoyed the hell out of that, issue on issue on issue. As mad as it was production-wise, having no lead time, and the frantic nature of trying to get every issue done on time, it was just such fun to do it. Every issue was just a hoot. So,
well, it came across on the page, man. Yeah, I mean,
but the same with Batman. It's just it's different, but it's a different hoot. So, and I've got this other project I'm due to start next month, and that's going to be based on the first piece I'm doing a piece which will be like an announcement piece for it, which will be released before Christmas. Based on that piece alone, people will get the idea that this is a whole different level of fun. So, it's the ideal, isn't it? I've been doing this job for 30 plus years, and I'm still. There's still fun to be had. This is again, to be fair, this project is again me revisiting, in part, something that had a profound impact on me as a child in my reading at DC Comics. So, I've done the Justice League stuff to greater or probably more accurately lesser degrees of success.
I like to run, man. Don't kid yourself.
Well, it was all right.
I told you that Zod story in particular, I thought was.
But the Rouse story.
Rouse, excuse me, that's what I meant. Yeah. Rouse, absolutely, man. God, what a great. No one had really addressed. In fact, again, a moment in the Luthor villain issue and stuff. You kind of go back and you've got that amalgam of Superman and Martian Manhunter, and he wears the symbol of Rao and everything. And
but here's the thing. put in the script the symbol of Rao, and I thought, well, I came up with the symbol of Rao, and then I did a little bit of research, and they'd done it on Supergirl, right?
Yes.
Yes. And I looked at it and I thought, actually, that is my bloody symbol. But they've just done a more polished design thing. But that's my Rao
wait
symbol.
A minute.
It's like, I think, bloody hell.
Yeah, man. Hey, you better call Jeff.
Where's the credit? Where's my $1 million for that? It's just.
As I learned from Jerry Ordway, it's not that much money, but it is good money. I mean, God, he created Cat Grant, and and so while Cat Grant was a regular on Supergirl, and every time she pops up, he gets a check. So, and that's funny. I do want to, and I'll get back to Batman Great, but while we're on the subject, as we were talking about the different iterations of the Joker, the crossover that they're planning for this winter. Man, I am so excited, and those photos of Brandon Routh next to
I know.
Tyler Hockman.
It's funny because it was coming up with Rob Williams and a few other guys that were just like, we were talking about this and were saying that, actually, because they've just released this shot of Brandon as Clark Kent, editor-in-chief of Daily Planet.
Oh, wow.
Today.
I didn't see it today. And Go on.
Right. And so I was just thinking, I'd take that show. God, I know he's leaving Legends, but honestly, do the Superman show.
Please.
Put Brandon Routh in it. Do the Superman show.
Remember in Justice Society in the 70s when it was Wally Wood and Joe Staten and those guys doing Justice Society, and that first issue that was Wood and Keith Giffen, and I've spoke to Keith about this in the past, but when you had Clark Kent, editor of the Daily Star, and just brooding, and then also when he became Superman, and it was that fantastic, pure Joe Shuster, squinty-eyed Superman of the late 30s and stuff. And it's like,
I remember that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's the guy. And I'm so happy for Brandon Routh to get back to it. But all the stunt casting that they're doing and getting,
I know,
my God, and getting.
Did you hear they released today that Guggenheim had apparently approached Nick Cage about doing it?
Oh wow.
I don't know whether he's in it or not,
wow.
but they certainly they'd at least approached him and said, do you want to put the suit on?
Oh, that would have been great, and give him the long hair like we've seen in the production stills.
I kind of wonder whether, given the age, whether that's kind of maybe where they were going to go with a Kingdom Come Superman and do Nick Cage as that, and that he didn't do it, and they decided, oh, well, hang on a minute, we've got a Superman already, we've got Brandon Routh, like, put him in the Kingdom Come costume. But actually, looking at him in that costume and looking at him in the Clark Kent suit again, you think, do the show, for fuck's sake.
Please.
Do the damn show.
Yes, please.
We said this last time, Discovery and Pike on Enterprise, do the show. Yes. That's the show. There it is. No brainer.
I hear you, man.
I've just had the same reaction, and this is without even seeing a moment of footage of seeing those shots of Brandon Routh as Superman again. You think, like, that's it. Do the show. It's like having Christopher Reeve back again. Do the fucking show.
Again,
you hear that they're talking about, they're going to do the all-girl spin-off of Arrow, and that's great too.
Sure.
But that I'd heard they were planning at least 2 other shows, and I kind of hope, I really hope that somebody looked at this stuff and thought, we could do a Superman show with Brandon Routh. Nobody's doing the movies. They can't.
This is the time to do it. Yes.
They can't do a Batman TV show because of the way the rights are held.
Because they,
exactly, all of that. Yeah. So, but that doesn't hold with Superman. Tyler Hoechlin, they've got him doing that, and it's all perfectly fine.
Oh, absolutely, he's great.
Yeah, but that shot of Brandon Routh in Superman in the Superman costume again, it's just like,
I agree with you, man. Well, it's funny. I was just talking to Jeff Parker earlier today, and we were talking about art. 1 second. Okay. We were talking about James Bond and the various iterations of Bond. And it's like, I include George Lazenby when I say this. There's never been a bad Bond. And certainly he might have been a lesser actor than the others who've been Bond. There have been bad stories and bad productions, but I think the people that have played Bond have been great. And I think, again, you could say the same thing with a lot of these different iterations of like Brandon Routh. It wasn't Superman Returns was not his fault. Again, Bryan Singer made these choices. Some of them were okay. Some of them not crazy about. I felt Kate Bosworth was far too young to be Lois Lane, and didn't.
At that age.
But again, I mean, and no, this crossover. I've had the chance to really hang out with Mark at extended times, going and coming from conventions where we're going back to the airport or whatever, and we'd have long conversations. And I know for a long time, as usual, unfortunately, it's the network that doesn't understand what they have. And I know they've been wanting to do these crossovers and these kind of ideas like since the first one, and it was nope. And now, after the success of the last two, they get it. And they see the appeal of all this. And especially it's a great way to kind of close out Arrow with all these ideas as well. But, I mean, my God, Burt Ward coming back? Kevin Conroy being older Bruce Wayne?
And there's rumor that Linda Carter's going to put the Wonder Woman kind of be an older version of Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that even they tried to get Nick Cage in that. As just as an idea, just that embraces everything we as a kid loved about Crisis. That it had everybody in it. Other versions on other Earths, and you think that really has embraced the kind of ethos of the. I know Crisis didn't kind of succeed in what it was supposed to have originally intended to be, in terms of really kind of bringing together all of those different Earths and changing all the continuity of all the books, because, of course, Batman continuity didn't change and Captain Carrot was still out there.
Sure.
So it wasn't...
I love Captain Carrot. Well,
I agree, but, it's when Dick Giordano says that, we're going to get rid of all of the other Earths except Captain Carrot, you think, missing the point here.
Infinite. I told Jeff Johns when Infinite Crisis was going on, and I think it was in the second issue, and you had Earth 2 Golden Age Superman talking to Earth 1 Batman, and there was this beautiful moment where he's like, Bruce, I know you don't know who I am, but I've known you all my life, and you're the one man I could trust. And it's great because this genuine warmth coming from him, and again, Batman's in the cowl and everything, but I don't know how Perez or whoever it was able to convey it, but this great subtext moment of, oh my God, this guy does know who I am. And this is even more strange, and I don't know how to react to this. But it's like those are the kind of moments that a great, shared multiverse can give you. Again, the story that you and Jason did, I think, in the Luthor book. If you haven't picked it up, I can't rave enough about it, because really it was such a delight to read, and it's and it gives you those kind of great character moments. And also getting back to Batman Grave, and by all means, feel free if you had something to say about what I just said before I get back to Batman Grave.
Oh well, I was just going to point while we're talking about the Crisis thing is that my kids that watch the show, it's like they come into the office every couple of days and say, "Have you seen the latest news? Like Brandon, have you seen Brandon Routh in the costume? It's like it's Superman, again." And they've got a new Ray Palmer, they've got a new Atom coming in, and Ryan Choi's coming in as Atom. Yes. And it's like, have you heard this character's coming in? This character's coming in. This character's going to maybe. Do you think that one will die? And they're really digging it, and they didn't read Crisis in the 80s, but they're just digging this whole idea of this. Like, of course it is. Like every single DC movie and TV show now exists in continuity in the TV shows because. That's the way that's the way they're thinking. They're proving it now because Brandon Routh is still Superman. And so, and Tom Welling is Superman.
Yes, I'm so happy he's coming back. And Erica Durance, who I think is one of the best Loises ever.
I doubt we will ever see Tom Welling in the costume. I think they'll just do the Clark thing because that was the nature of the show he was on.
Fair enough, maybe, probably.
Yeah, but at the same time, just the fact that they're all there and they still use the same Smallville sets for Tyler Hoechlin's Superman. It's still the same Smallville set. It's still the same farm building near Vancouver. And, but my 16-year-old came and said, did you think, he said, after the Crisis thing, if they're doing this whole thing before Crisis and after Crisis on the TV shows, do you think that means that, Black Lightning will actually be on the same Earth as Supergirl, and the Supergirl on the same Earth as Flash now, because they'll just all condense them all into one Earth and are all in the same, and they can do all these crossovers, and I'm going, yeah,
exactly.
I'll figure.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's like, God, that's great.
Yeah, man.
It's great.
Ah.
So, I just love that they're getting, but I said before, we did it in comics, they're getting it on the TV show. And they wouldn't exist without the comics, but at the same time is my generation, my kids' generations, just, they don't want to read the comics. They don't want to read the original material. They just want to watch the TV shows and enjoy the movies. So, it's kind of like there's a little sadness in it for me, but at the same time, I love that they love the same things that I loved at the same age I was, when I was their age, just exactly the same stuff. It just exactly, in fact, the same. I was 15, 16 when Crisis came out. My 15, 16-year-old son, Will, is just as excited, but he's excited because they're doing Crisis on TV. We never got that shit.
No. And again, thank God these the Greg Berlantes and the Guggenheims and the like, the producers, grew up loving this stuff too, and now are in a position, and again, thankfully, after 6 or 7 years, where the network finally gets it. And it's like, okay, do it. And again, based on, the Earth X event was fantastic, and I liked last year's Crisis, and I liked the little moments like Tyler and whoever was playing Lois back on the farm, and they play the "Save Me" song, and you're back in Smallville, as you should be.
Yeah.
And I'm really intrigued of what we're going to get with Batwoman also debuting this weekend.
That's right.
So is it going to be on TV by you guys as well this weekend?
No, we have to wait because you guys will get things like Batwoman this weekend, and you'll get Crisis around December. We won't get that till about February.
Oh wow! Oh man, I see now. That's like our former Doctor Who frustration back in the day.
Yeah, yeah. It's just because by the time they show it on Sky over here, it's a couple of months behind where you are. Because what they try to do is they try to do it without the, or as much as possible without the mid-season break. So they kind of try to run through it relatively.
Great. That's great. Good for you guys, because honestly, it infuriates.
Yeah, but it means you get all the Crisis stuff. We get all the news, and we still can't see Crisis. So,
that's true. That kind of sucks from a spoiler standpoint. I can appreciate that. That's going to make it that much harder for you guys. I get it, man, and that's a shame. But yeah, I'm very excited, and also the idea that yes, we'll all be on one Earth, because I love that Black Lightning show too, and really from day one, I really was just like, oh, this is great. And again, much like Crisis and what we've just been saying, that that his backstory is totally those Trevor Von Eden, Tony Isabella stories.
Yeah,
and it's like,
and I kind of wonder whether they wouldn't build out of Black Lightning and do an Outsiders TV series as well, even if it's just like for a single season, like Defenders was for the Marvel TV show.
Sure.
And I have to wonder whether because I've heard there's talk of Markovia and Geoforce and all that stuff coming together.
Yes.
You think, well, because again, my kid's going to say, do you think they're going to do an Outsiders show? It's like, they read all the same comics I did. This stuff isn't there by accident.
Well, and I'm so glad that DC Universe will survive and likely morph into Warner's streaming service when they're ready to be up and running. Because, goddamn, man, that stuff has been so good. And I don't know how much of that you've had a chance to watch.
Show, but I've seen the first season of Titans, and actually everything I've seen the second season suggests it'll be even better because Wonder Girl in costume, Nightwing, all that stuff.
Yeah.
You think this looks great. And Aqualad, that shot of Aqualad the other day, and you think this is great. This is just, my kids have just got it made. They've got all the video games. We got one movie every few years. We got Superman the movie, Superman 2, and then we got, unfortunately, Superman 3 and Superman 4. And we got, 1989, we got, Batman, which, had it was okay, it was its thing.
Well, no,
it was great at being what it was.
And the Flash TV series was right around that time, too.
But, he's still the Flash. That's great.
I know. Oh, man, I finally got to meet him in August at a Connecticut show. And I'm like, oh, dude, it was fine when you were Barry's dad, but when they made you Jay Garrick, I'm like, that's great. And I even took a picture of us both in Flash kind of sprint freeze frame
Yeah, but he's not only Jay Garrick, he is actually now, as of last year, and again in the Crisis, he's the original 90s Flash, you know, so he's still doing it. You know, that's just, I love the fact they brought every DC show into continuity. I kind of wonder whether they're going to bring that Aquaman pilot into continuity.
With Justin,
where he
the kid who played...
No, the other one. The one that they did in, like, which looked like it was shot by somebody who'd only ever shot pornography.
I don't remember that.
But it was
not the guy who played Arrow in
No, not that.
Okay.
This is years earlier.
No, I haven't seen this. Go on.
Oh God, it was. I mean, there was lots of shots of him running along cliffside paths. You know, obviously because danger was happening imminently, so he had to take a 20-mile hike before he could turn into Aquaman. And then he dives into the water, and his costume suddenly appears, and it's the kind of orange Romana Fraden one.
Okay. I love that.
But he has this fight with his pirates on a boat, and he's using ballistic starfish. It's versus the angler. It's Mark Waid sent me this thing. It's the most embarrassingly.
That's fantastic. Go on.
The most embarrassingly awful thing I have possibly ever seen.
Worse than the Justice League movie?
Oh yes, yes, significantly worse than that.
Wow. Poor David Ogden as fat Martian Manhunter. Oh well.
Did you ever see the failed Wonder Woman pilot by the guys who did the '66 Batman show? Yeah, that level.
Oh yeah.
It's that level, but without the production values.
Wow, interesting. Oh my God.
Yeah,
oh, that's so funny, man. You're killing me.
Yeah.
That's terrific. Jesus.
Anyway, so I kind of wonder whether Guggenheim's going to bring all of that into continuity. It's going to kind of ignore all that and just assume that because the other stuff that he's brought in is in continuity, you assume that stuff's there, but we don't have to show it.
Sure, absolutely. I am. This seriously is such a delight. And again, all the crap we grew up with. And again, we sound like Dana Carvey, the American comedian, always does. You know, in my day, we used to get beat on the head, and we loved it. And it's true. I mean, we get that terrible the superhero roast that's on DC Universe now, and people can watch it. Oh my God! And I mean, I remember watching it back on NBC, one of the American networks, when it was first on. Because again, it was like, well, Adam Westenberg.
That's all you had.
You know, they're back. Of course, I'm going to watch.
I know. You kind of wonder. Yeah, I mean, just for fan service alone, people are going to love this Crisis.
Absolutely, man.
It's over.
Too funny.
And I'm happy to promote it as much as humanly possible.
No, but it's coming up, and that's I figured along with the projects we would be talking about some things that are either happening now or are going to happen soon. Back to Batman Grave, because it's one part of it that I really do love, and that's Alfred's role, at least in the first issue of the story. And again, there's some great acting moments and great character moments between him and Bruce, and the concerns he has over, Batman's war on crime. And again, it's called Batman Grave. You see Alfred tending to the Wayne graves and looking very sadly at, as he says, and it was such a great... Well, I don't want to spoil. I'm not going to say what he says. Okay. Because, of course, it's coming out. I'm going to probably... I intend to put this out, like, on Monday, so people can get excited for Wednesday when Batman Grave drops. But yeah, I don't feel bad talking about just this Alfred-Bruce relationship and where Alfred is in terms of...
No, it's all because actually that's the key relationship in the whole series, actually. Yeah.
So
because there's no Robin, there's no Catwoman. It really is the Bruce's relationship throughout the whole series, and his additional point of view is always Alfred's. And actually, that scene in issue 1 where Alfred's drinking the whiskey.
Yes.
There is a follow-up. There's the hangover scene in issue 2. Which was just a joy to draw, honestly. It's just having a character like... And Warren writes the best Alfred since Arthur with Dudley Moore.
I love...
Would you like me to wash your prick for you, you little shit?
Feel good, absolutely, man.
I mean, he doesn't quite say that, but he's, this is the best Alfred since John Gielgud in Arthur. Honestly, it's fantastic.
I like that Michael, and I forget his last name, but the guy who did the Alfred character in the Tim Burton and Schumacher films.
Oh, God, Michael Goff, yeah.
Yeah, Michael Goff. Oh, my God, he was great, too. And he clearly was on the John Gielgud page book, playbook and
very
everything.
much so.
Yeah, and it's great because that's. I like that, a bit of Alfred being kind of a father figure, but and certainly he's like that in Grave. But I also like that he's a former warrior himself.
Yeah, I agree. And if I was casting Alfred for Robert Pattinson's movie, oh God, his name's gone out of my head because I'm so bloody tired. Jerome Flynn. I would cast Jerome Flynn in a heartbeat.
Right, I'm looking up Jerome Flynn while we're talking. Go on.
Have you watched Game of Thrones?
Embarrassingly, I haven't. I know. I'm the one guy who hasn't.
Have you watched Ripper Street?
Yes. Hold on.
He was the sergeant in Ripper Street with the beard.
Oh, sure. I'm looking at him now. Absolutely.
Him. Just also in the way it's a slightly kind of working man accent, and he's older now, but he's a guy who's beaten the shit out of a lot of people in his past. And that's the kind of guy you want as Alfred, because it's the kind of guy who could handle repairing Batmobile, and he could repair all the gadgets, and he could keep the costume together. And it's not just a matter of steam cleaning it; it's about kind of keeping combat gear combat ready.
Sure.
And so yes, he's a gentleman's gentleman, and he's learned how to do that. But he's also, he's a former, hard guy himself. Yeah. I mean, it was the same when I don't know how much of this actually really came to be genuinely truthful, but when Nolan first started circling the Batman Begins project, Mark Miller and I were talking, and Mark was good friends with at that point with David Goyer, and there was talk about casting oh God, you can tell I'm tired.
I was going to say, dude, I hope I'm not taxing you. Go on.
No. Oh, bloody hell. Odin. Anthony Hopkins.
Sure.
So, yeah, because All That Remains of the Day was the movie before that, where Christopher Reeve was in that. He played but Remains of the Day, Alfred Hopkins played the butler.
Yes.
And that was the idea. And I said to Miller at the time, I said, no, that's wrong. You've got to have Michael Caine. And Miller was like, you don't need Michael Caine. He's like, you're fucking hell. And I said, no, but you look at Michael Caine's movie history, is like The French Connection. He's done Alfie. Look at those 60s movies. This is the guy who was the hard ass before Bruce was the hard ass. And that's the guy you need to have as Alfred. And he's like, oh yeah, I can see that. I'll tell Goyer about it. 2 weeks later, fucking Michael Caine was cast. I was thinking, and Michael Caine lives around the bloody corner from me. Right.
Wow.
When he's over here, his house is around the corner here, but he doesn't. He spends most of his time abroad now.
Okay.
But his house is around the corner. He's often seen in town and whatnot. And I said, I kept thinking I should go up to him and say, you got that job. You got that job because I said you would be really good at it. And I think possibly that may not go down too well. But
oh man,
I do feel like I was instrumental in him securing that particular role.
That's fantastic.
Now, Master Bruce, I would like to take the car out for a spin. It's not the most scintillating deliveries, but nonetheless, I feel like I was instrumental in securing that role for him.
I love the Trip movies with Rob Brydon and Steve Coogan doing canes, and I'm so glad because as a radio guy, I've been a mimic, and I do a ton of. I don't bloody like what I'm seeing right now. I mean, and again, I have my Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon to thank for giving me the blueprint. And it's like, I love. I mean, and you have to do Michael Caine shouting, although they, of course, can do quiet Michael Caine. But I love it, man. I'm such a fan.
My name is Michael Caine. Yeah, I know. It's my wife used to work in a local bookshop. Michael Caine used to go in there, and she was going into. I was with her. She was going in to open up the bookstore one morning, and they were building a hotel next door, and they'd accidentally knocked through the wall into the bookstore, so it was like chaos, like a bomb. And we were unlocking the door, and Michael Caine came up, and there was this voice behind me that said, "My God!" And I looked back, and I said, "Yes." And of course, they were only supposed to blow the bloody doors off.
Exactly.
And
Italian job.
he looked at me and he went, "That's very good."
That's awesome. You know, I love...
How many times in a life are you ever going to get that opportunity? I mean, like...
Absolutely, my God. I love Michael Parkinson's talk show, and I've watched hours of it on YouTube. Thank God someone's posting it. And there's this great stuff right near the end where Caine was on and talking about how my name is Michael Caine, and he's like, he goes, there's a birthday card, and it's like, it's your birthday today. Not a lot of people know that. You know, and it's just, I mean, it was great, and it was just him like, you know, oh yeah, everybody does me. He goes, apparently there's satellite navigation now, so instead of Siri telling you to take a left or right, you could have some guy imitating Michael Caine. And he goes, and I've been asked at parties, are you doing sapnats? And I'm like, no, of course not. No, you know, and it's, oh my God, I'm a lifelong fan. Alfie, The Italian Job, of course. Every time on cable, on American cable, I see Get Carter in the listings. Unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, it's the Stallone Get Carter. And it's like, no, man.
Yeah.
I mean, God damn, that's like one of the greatest British movies ever, the original Get Carter. And all the Harry Palmer movies. And, I am, my God, obviously, I can go on for hours about Michael Caine. So that's fantastic that you're his neighbor. That's amazing.
Well,
whatever.
His house is up for sale, actually. He's obviously trying to say, if I had £3.5 million, I'd buy it.
His house, that'd be amazing. Jeff Parker, or rather Gabe Hardman, I was just talking about this with Parker. Gabe Hardman, the artist, there was a Jack Webb house estate sale, the Dragnet guy. And he was such a television mogul and also a big jazz aficionado and stuff he was back in the day. And his house is just, I mean, the photographs that Gabe shared were just amazing. And also, I don't know if you're aware of this, there's a great Sinatra documentary that came out last year called Sinatra in Palm Springs, and they focused on his homes in Palm Springs, and they're amazing, and also all the people that knew him and stuff. But it's a fantastic documentary. Well, anyway, Michael Caine, good Lord, like I said, I love those trip movies because as I said, I am a poor man's impressionist, and I love learning how to do various voices, watching really great ones. And my God, Bryden and Coogan. I mean, honestly, I'll hand it to Coogan. I never thought of him as a great impressionist, and he's...
No, that's where he got his start. He got his start doing impersonations, like doing things for... We had the show called Spitting Image over here.
Yes.
Yeah, no, so his earliest days were doing impersonations, long before Alan Partridge showed up in the early 90s.
So Spitting Image, the puppet show, he was doing voices for that?
I think so, yeah. I think that,
or that other one, that John Cole, and I love John Coleshaw. My God, that guy's incredible.
Oh, his Doctor Who stuff.
Oh God, his Tom Baker's letter perfect. Good Lord.
Yeah, I was showing one of my kids that the other day because they did this one where they were going to a furniture store and he does this whole thing about checking to see the wardrobes. There's like and he goes into one, and they'd obviously set it up because the guys on the shop floor couldn't believe it because he's doing this thing about, when we're going through the time and space, and he goes in and he closes the door and he comes out of a completely different wardrobe somewhere else in the store. But it's uncanny, how good that stuff is.
Dead Ringers, isn't that's the audio, that's the radio show where they call people. Oh my God!
You were talking about this before about Michael Caine doing sat-nav stuff, but Brian Blessed did a sat-nav.
Oh my God, that'd be great!
Oh, he did. He did it. He genuinely did it. Years ago, it's like, you can't turn right, turn left, you stupid fucker! At the top of his lungs, everybody, you great steaming pile of shit, turn left!
That would be amazing, man. Oh my God, I love that guy, man. Claudius is the first time I saw him when he was Augustus Caesar, and then of course Flash Gordon at Volta, and I'm like, oh, this is the man. And truly, like, I have the TV show The Sweeney, and he pops up on there as a criminal and stuff.
He popped up in Doctor Who. He was in Blake 7. He was in all these shows. Yeah. I was at a few friends and I. He does this one-man show which tours the country. He uses it to raise money because his wife turned their house into an animal refuge years ago. He uses the money to kind of fund all the stuff for they've got thousands of dogs, hundreds of horses, all that kind of stuff. And he just does this one-man show. He just sits on the stage and talks. He talks about his life and his career and stuff. He's a great raconteur. But of course, there's a lot of shouting involved. which is great. The thing is, I've been impersonating Brian Blessed for years with friends, and they know all the material. I've done it all, you know. I actually did it at one of the DC bashes years ago. I have to mention that I did Brian Blessed, and they said, go and do the Gordon's Alive. You go, Gordon's Alive! And then it's like, oh, well, who wants to live forever? You did all this stuff. And then it's just like you're off for the whole night. They won't let you leave it alone.
I hear you, man. No, that's terrific. Well, that's, honestly, I was able to endear myself to several DC executives because of one of my first conventions, I started doing my Dan DiDio. All right, let me tell you, we got this great idea. I'm going to do it. And again, it's a poor man's Jackie Mason or whatever. And Dan, I was in Portland for the Rose City Con, and he and Bob Wayne were there, and I ran into them, and I shook his hand, and I'm like, Dan, seriously, you were such a good sport. Because every time I would be at the booth, so, Fletch and Jan Jones, when she was there and everything. Oh, you got to do Dan. I'm like, all right. So I was happy to do it. But yeah, I'm like, no offense, Dan. No, it's all right. I know you're kidding.
I promise that. What's that? Should anybody wish it, whenever I'm at a convention, I will do Brian Blessed. The thing is, you do when you get these characters like that. You take. Like a specific monologue, and you realize when you start inserting them into it, like what they do in The Trip, where they talk about Michael Caine doing things like ordering food or whatnot. But when you insert that kind of level of impersonated character into something, you realize how absurd some of it is. Like when Andrew Curry and I used to share a studio together, he'd give me these pieces of stuff to do in the style of Brian Blessed, and that could be instruction manuals, or like like the opening monologue to War of the Worlds, for instance.
The record, the album.
No one would have believed in the last years, because he likes to whisper a lot. In the last years of Dungeon, the human affairs were being watched from the timeless words of and you go off on this like huge tangent of shouting and quiet stuff.
That's the rock opera War of the Worlds, am I right? The 70s?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
One of the Jeff Wayne.
I had friends who had that. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't realize that was Blessed. That's fantastic, man. No, it's, again, that's what's kind of missing with a lot of today's actors that had a look, but also their voices really had character. I mean, I defy someone to do a Brad Pitt interview or imitation. I don't know if you can. Matt Damon.
Yeah, but the thing is, those guys are all theatre actors to start with.
Right.
And actually, I remember, and this was profoundly influential for me as an artist too. Actually, I remember watching. You talked about Michael Parkinson a while back.
Yes.
I watched
the Johnny Carson of England for people who don't know that we're talking about. But go on.
Yeah, Parkinson was the chat show guy. He got all the best guests, the biggest guests, the movie stuff.
Incredible interviews.
And he knew just how to get them to talk.
Yes, very much so.
But he got there was an interview he did with Ian McKellen when Ian McKellen was still a young man with brown hair. And McKellen had just started moving from theatre, being a known theatre actor, into TV and occasional film parts at this point. And he started talking about the way that changed his acting, because he said, when you're on the stage, you're visible. All of you is visible all of the time. Your whole body is visible all of the time. So it changes the way you move physically, the way you express the words that you're speaking physically, the way you move in the space, which again is always all visible all of the time. On TV and film, it's not. On TV and film, your face is visible. Your face and shoulders are visible. Very occasionally you get a long shot, but you don't do an awful lot in the long shot. Mostly just walking around. When you get to do the actual acting, it's in usually a head or head and shoulders shot. And so your physical mannerisms are entirely changed. And it completely changed how I thought about how you use the full body, the physical body, the body in space, the head and shoulders, the face, and all of that in the way one acts in comics, or at least the characters act in comics. It was just, it was one of those things I saw as a late teenager. It was profoundly influential. It took me years to be able to actually put this into any kind of practice, but it's something I've never forgotten. And, because acting is acting, whether it's somebody delivering lines or you're drawing pictures. It's just I think it's it's interesting the way, if an actor's talking about the way they have to move physically, they have to deliver lines physically. You can't blink too often on camera, and you can't move too much when you're in close up, because the large scale head and shoulder movements are going to completely throw off the way the camera's focusing on you. And the same is true in comics to a degree. I mean, to a degree, it's not the same, because again, what you're drawing doesn't have motion of its own, but it that kind of understanding allows you to be able to look at the shot that you're drawing, the head and shoulders, the head, the full body and stuff, the body in space, the body in environment, and think, how can I use this to express just as the actor would express? And I don't mean that to sound as pompous as it's ultimately sounding, but I think it is interesting anyway, at least in terms of kind of the extra dimension it can help you bring to what you're drawing.
Understood. I know that makes sense, and I do. I love. We used to get a McKellen. It was him teaching how to do Shakespeare. Just him on stage and kind of going over some of the soliloquies and everything. And and it's funny, as you mentioned, seeing him with brown hair and stuff, with the Downton Abbey movie coming out. As it has. I wasn't a watcher of the show, but certainly aware of it and aware of its popularity. I will see the movie because actually a friend of mine is doing a rewatch of the episodes podcast and asked if I would come on as someone cold, because I had seen Upstairs Downstairs in the 70s and Gosford Park, a Robert Altman movie that had that kind of same milieu. And I'm I don't watch doctor shows anymore. I don't watch medical shows because I'm like, after several decades, I'm kind of done with them. And that's why I kind of felt the same way about Downton Abbey. But that said, much like seeing young Ian McKellen, I used to have it bad for Maggie Smith in the 60s and 70s. She was adorable. Uh-huh. And I mean, she's still an incredible actor. And I love seeing that she's still going and doing so. I loved the film she made that Dustin Hoffman directed, Quartet, with her and Billy Connolly and several others, about like kind of an opera retirement home. And I thought,
I like that. Yeah, that was good.
So I mean, I'm always happy to see her. But yeah, it's funny, and I it's great to see when you see McKellen as kind of a young. I mean, he's a great looking old dude too. But yeah, I mean, he was a good looking young man as well, obviously. And it's like, oh, that's really cool to see them when they were young like that. We don't get that as much with the British actors unless we go deep, like I told you with. Like I Claudius, and I mean, I'm Derek Jacobi. I've been a fan of his since I Claudius. Good Lord.
Oh, Derek Jacobi, yes.
Did you see that Frasier episode where?
That was only funny because it was true.
Where he plays like a Dana.
I adore Frasier. I still rewatch that. It's one of the most rewatchable shows I think ever. And I love the fact they're thinking about bringing him back as the next generation of Frasier with a completely new kind of surround and a new environment. But I'd watch. If the writing's as good as that, I'd watch that in a heartbeat.
I hope so, man, because the Murphy Brown reboot was so bad, was painfully. It was like watching grade school children trying to do a Murphy Brown skit. Skit. And
I don't think a revival of Friends would work either, even if they all agreed to do it. But I think there's something about Kelsey Grammer. I think that if they get the material right, I think he could still pull off that performance. And it won't be a reboot. You won't have Daphne. You won't necessarily have Niles
poor
every
Martin
episode.
Dead,
but I think
the father's dead. I know.
But the thing is that was. Yeah, and I still rewatch that show because it's still so relentlessly funny and entertaining. And all this, I talked about this before, my pomposity with wine is I have friends that completely cut through that when they refer to me and my friend Andrew as Niles and Frasier. Because there was one point we were trying these two wines and he was saying, I'm getting definitely wood notes here. Yes, definitely woody, definitely woody. And I was going, what do you think this is? I'm not getting the wood, but I'm definitely getting some sort of like foliage, bushy. So, and this guy looked at us, so he's got wood and you've got bush, right? Yeah, it's like, okay.
There's a great Rumpole of the Bailey episode and Short Story. I love that show, man. Leo McKern.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, so good. And John Mortimer, what a great writer. I even bought the short stories, and I'm sure they were adapted from the television scripts. I didn't care. I loved the stories. But there was a wine tasting case that he dealt with and stuff, and it was his pompous Claude Erskine Brown taking him to a wine tasting. And, Mr. Rumpel, what do you think? He's like, damn good stuff. He had nothing to say.
It's about as much as you get, really.
Well, and he'd go to Pomeroy's and then drink their claret that was homemade or whatever, their bar call claret. And honestly, I loved that even after poor McKern passed away, that Mortimer continued to write books until his death of Rumpel.
I know that when I first moved down to London in the early 90s, Marvel had a UK office, which is where I worked in the basement. Liam Sharp and I, Andrew Curry, Andy Lanning, couple of other guys, we all worked in the basement there, and it was right opposite Temple Tube Station, which to anybody else is just off Fleet Street, just round the corner from the Courts of Justice, and all the lawyers were literally in the buildings behind us. So Temple area was named after the Knights Templar because that's where it was founded. So all the law courts and the Inns of Court, which were where the lawyers had their offices for the Supreme Court and the High Court and the Supreme Courts of Justice, they were all in these beautifully cultured gardens, and it was just like this village in the middle of London. It was just a beautiful place. I actually completely forgot what I was going with.
Well, we talking about Rumpel and Old Bailey, and then, obviously, Pomeroy's Wine Bar, perhaps, or...
Oh, yeah, that was wine. Okay, so Paul Neary and I... So Paul was the editor-in-chief at Marvel UK at the time. I was, 22 in 1992, and one of the first things that ever happened when I moved down there was Paul introduced me to the idea of the all-day lunch, which was, we'd go to the local wine bar and you'd at lunchtime, and they would stay there until, in fact, after dinner time, and the last train home at about 11. Which you could just about manage to stagger to if somebody roughly pointed you in the right direction. It would even you'd meander a little bit. There'd be some undulation, but you'd eventually get to your train, and you'd find somehow your way home. But one night we didn't stay particularly late, but we went down Fleet Street, and there was this wine shop opposite the law courts, the London law courts, where all the QCs and the barristers would go in. And we went in because we liked wine. We went in to have a look around, and some QC or barrister walked in. Obviously, clearly knew the name. Was on first name terms with the man who ran the shop. While we're looking at all these bewildering array of wines we'd never heard of, this chap said to him, "No, Nigel, nothing major tonight. Just a swift drink, I think. Nothing expensive. Just about £80 ought to do it." And this, bear in mind, this is 1992, which is about £300 today. And so Paul and I just kind of sidled out the shop without buying anything and just walked away without ever going in again. And the thing is, it's interesting how one looks at one's life, because now I would go back in that shop and I would be the man. Nothing expensive, Nigel. About 100 quid ought to do it, eh? What? And you think you get away with it now, but this has got absolutely fuck all to do with Batman. Do you know that?
Brian, as I said, tangents are welcome. They always are on Word Balloon. People love this stuff. And it's great, man. This is how we get to know you and everything, man. So, and again, we're kind of limited on what we can say about Batman's Grave. It hasn't come out yet, and we want people... whenever I talk to Jeff Johns, we do a great talk, and then we'd be off the record. He'd go, now, you know what? You want to know what happens next? And I'm like... No, man, I want to read it on Wednesday. I'm like, it's okay. I'm like, I can wait, but he was so excited he wanted to share it. And some creators are like that with me, which is very, very sweet that they are. And I absolutely, at this point, I'm like, sure, man, I'm still going to read it. But yeah, tell me, it's interesting. And again, it is this kind of stuff, like your love of wine, that hopefully the next time you're at a show or something like that, hey, I like wine too. Someone's going to walk up and talk Robert Parker with you or somebody. Or another wine critic, or whatever, and see what you like. Uh-huh. So no, that's great.
Yeah, I've read a lot of Parker's stuff.
Have you?
Yeah, definitely.
That's cool.
Yeah, well, it is. I find him that he and I are on fairly fairly equal terms in how we approach the wine. So I found his critiques to be fairly, fairly on par with my own in terms of the wines that I buy and the wines that I try. So his kind of the Parker points and the Parker reviews I found very much so.
Absolutely, man. No, it's funny. I originally encountered him because I was a fan of the Robert Parker that was writing the Spencer detective novels. And, and online was looking for any Spencer fan information. And it's like, wine critic Robert Parker. I'm like, oh. So that's how I kind of stumbled on him. I'm a neophyte when it comes to wines. I'm Rumpole in the wine bar.
Well, your country produces a huge amount of quite spectacular wines.
Yeah.
I buy some, and I have them shipped over because they're actually cheaper to buy and pay customs charges bring over than it is to buy them over here from wine suppliers. But
okay.
But the stuff some California stuff I buy on a fairly regular basis. It's spectacular stuff.
That's cool. And it's funny. Netflix, of course, is based around wine country because I've got a friend that works at one of the local wineries up in Sonoma Valley and everything, and she's become good friends with like the big execs of Netflix. She's like, I'm going to ask them if they do your show. I'm like, that would be great. I don't expect anything, but if they want to come on my little penny whistle show, that would be fantastic because I got a lot of questions. So, did you watch The Boys?
I did, yeah, I did. I love that show actually a lot, and I'm so looking. I'm just so looking forward to the next series, actually. And I know I like the original material, but I just the show on its own merits is just very, very good.
Yeah. I thought it had the opportunity to kind of. I mean, everyone obviously points to the Justice League comparisons, but as far as the way the businesses run, I can't help but think of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and kind of apply it to their corporation and their marketing, and that's what spoke to me as far as a Marvel connection for The Boys. As opposed to the obvious.
I can't imagine that was accidental.
Well, yeah.
The writing's too good for that not
Absolutely,
to be on purpose.
Yeah. No, it's and that's why, man. Again, like you say, you're envious of your children, but it's a really interesting time in terms of adaptation. And again, I think no matter what happens with this Joker film or even Birds of Prey, it's Birds of Prey that's coming up next week. I haven't seen the trailer yet. I'm hearing not good things about it.
I actually think that the Watchmen movie was a good decade ahead of its time because I think now it will play much bigger and much better in terms of the way it approaches the medium of superheroes, both in print and on film. And I think the way that it approaches that material, I think it would be much more receptive as an audience. You would get a better result now than you got 10 years ago.
I've said literally the same thing, and said that it ages very well, and because people are now used to all the tropes of superhero TV and film, they can relate a lot better. I agree with you, man.
This would also be a great time for somebody to buy my Real Heroes concept and make that into a very exciting movie for many millions of dollars. Just should anybody be listening and think that that's a good opportunity.
Hey,
anyway, throw that one in there. Just a bit of self-promotion. I don't do a lot of it. Anyway.
That's excellent, man. And I wanted to know, I don't remember if you were a Galactica fan or not, but what do you think of this Galactica reboot they're talking about? I am too, then. Good.
Well, they're talking about it being more of a continuation than a reboot.
And that's where I'm confused.
I know. I mean, I'm kind of willing to just let them get on and do what they do if it ever comes out anyway. But they're right. I think it is too soon to reboot it because I think that reboot. And my 16-year-old just started watching it, and he's completely smitten with it. So even though it's 10 years old now, but it's just he's just suddenly got into it and seen how good it is, and how good the storytelling is and the characterizational work. And I still stand by my 16-year-old was saying, what's it about? And I explained. I said, also you have to remember that the man who created this was the man who co-created Star Trek Voyager, and he got to do in this everything he didn't get to do in Voyager.
Yep.
And because essentially it's what he would have done on Voyager.
Man.
Really,
more, absolutely.
Yeah. it's the Borg, it's the conflict on the crew, all of that.
Well,
stuff.
and also the wear on Galactica after taking a pounding.
All of it. All of it. That this is that what he was trying to do with Voyager was what he did ultimately on Galactica. And you have to think, God, wouldn't Voyager have been so bloody good if they got to
totally
do this?
Agree. Yes.
So anyway, but so I said that to Will, and because Will's a huge Star Trek fan, so he immediately said, "Okay, I'm going to watch that now." And then there's like 3 episodes, he's going, "Yeah, this is Voyager, but done really well, isn't it?"
That's cool. Yeah. Well, and I want now, and literally, this just occurred to me as we're talking. I wonder if maybe instead, as they said, that it's going to be within the continuity of Ron Moore's stuff. Maybe they're going to do Galactica 1980. And maybe we'll see. I understand that, when they finally reach Earth in the Ron Moore one. Spoilers, everyone, from 10 years ago.
But the thing is, they reached Earth, like 150,000 years ago?
Yeah, but also, what if suddenly it's a modern take on Galactica and the Cylons very quietly
but of course,
infiltrated?
Now we have AI developing even now, so... Yeah, no, that's an interesting idea, and I wondered about that too, because of course this will be the time we're pushing into space and we have AI developing. If you just hop around 100 years from now, you have the potential for the beginnings of what ultimately became that second generation of Cylons and humans,
exactly.
And I think that's an interesting concept. I don't want to kind of preempt it and spoil it for everybody by saying, "Hey, we figured out what the show is, and it's going to be awesome."
That's all right, please. Good Lord, man. Someone online's going to do it before and then put it in a blog post or in a video. So here's a little podcast throwaway moment.
CBR's opinion and stuff you must watch this because we know everything that's going to happen and we're going to tell you all about it.
I sadly agree. I know that is frustrating. Did you see Ad Astra?
I didn't. And the reason I didn't was because, I watched the trailer. It was okay. But then they kept putting out these posters of Brad Pitt looking really apologetic. And I thought, wow, this is a really boring movie.
That's so funny.
And a friend of mine who's a director too, he went to see it and he said, this is one of the most beautifully shot films I've ever seen. It was also one of the most dull films I've ever seen. And I always trust his judgment on this stuff. But the thing was that the movie posters just looked so much like Brad Pitt was apologizing for the quality the film had just been in that I didn't feel motivated to go and see it yet.
Well,
is it good? Have you seen it?
I loved it, man. And yes, it is definitely introspective. And I have heard other critics who I respect say how boring they felt it was. And in fact, I might be talking to one of those guys tonight after you're well asleep.
Oh, don't say that. Good.
Yeah, but I got to be honest. I loved it. I found it introspective, but in a good way. I hung on my seat, and also there was enough going on in terms of the story that it held my attention. I never felt bored. I was looking at everything, and also, and as a sci-fi fan, you'll appreciate this. I found it bookended 2001 very on the nose, in the same way that De Niro playing the Johnny Carson kind of character that he plays in Joker, and now Joaquin Phoenix's Joker is the Rupert Pupkin, king of comedy.
Right.
They go to a lot of places and ideas that Clark and Kubrick did for 2001, but in a much more grounded sense of what we know. And the fears of the unknown that were all around 2001, there's much more of a pragmatic and realistic thing of, no, actually, we do know the territory. And that's good. That's really and I find it really interesting, too. I don't want to tip anything, because I figure you'll eventually see it. But yeah, I really liked it. And I'll tell you, I won't deny that shot in the trailer of them in the moon buggies shooting at each other. I'm like, okay, I'm in. I mean, I'm such an old school Mercury through Apollo NASA fan, and I mean the shuttles were fine, and certainly the space station is an incredible achievement, but it isn't as exciting as those early space missions. And I think this really captures that feeling in the best way.
Okay, maybe I'll give it a look when it comes out on DVD then.
I figured exactly, and that's and hell, I mean, we're all busy. I mean, good Lord, I mean, I still haven't seen Far From Home, and now it's on digital, so I can just rent it and finally watch it. The Spider-Man movie. So.
Oh yeah.
So.
Well, see, that's all come round again, hasn't it?
Oh yeah. Well, and I'm glad because, and in fact, I couldn't help but notice the timing that Sony and Disney made up, because it's like, I bet that's going to screw with the video sales of Far From Home if you know that it ends in a cliffhanger that may never be resolved. So I'm glad they got to their senses and read the audience and the disappointment we all had about it and everything. So, Well, anyway, dude, we've been over 2 hours, and as always, it's like I try to, not keep you forever and everything. So,
I'm fine. Honestly, I'm happy to talk as long as you need me to. So,
was there? Well, that's why I'm trying to think of anything as we're discussing. But if not, we can wrap up, man. I mean, what else would you like to say about Batman Grave? We can certainly get back to the book.
I don't know.
I mean, that's the thing, man. And like I said, I don't, I don't want to spoil.
No, it's true. And honestly, if there's anything you want to ask. Otherwise, I'm happy to go and pass out ungraciously.
No, man, let's wrap up. Absolutely. No, we had a delightful conversation, and as always, man, it's a pleasure. And I'm excited for Picard. All my negative.
Yeah, we are counting down that one in here. Me and my two boys that are into that stuff.
I'm optimistic. Again, as negative as I was about Discovery, with the exception of Pike. Yeah,
but they did that stuff about Picard is going to be very introspective. It's all what he's done since, and then they just chuck 7 of 9 at you. The Data, Robert Picardo, the Borg, and you think, this is full on next gen, as it were. So you think, this is going to be it's going to be like Pike's Enterprise, I think.
Hopefully.
And I will put this down now without any foreknowledge whatsoever. I will put this down now that there will be an Enterprise. If they don't put an Enterprise in the Picard show, they're insanely stupid. So I will give you $100 on it now, John, if you're willing to take that bet, that there will be an Enterprise, possibly captained by somebody we already know, but nonetheless, there will be an Enterprise somewhere in the Picard show. There has to be. How can they not? If they're doing fan service like putting Riker, Troy, Picardo,
Hugh,
Data, Hugh from the Borg, 7 of 9. If they're doing that, there has to be an Enterprise in it somewhere.
No, you're probably right. And again,
even if it's the Enterprise F or G, it's 20 years since Nemesis, right, 20 years on.
Since E, absolutely, man.
Right. So they're gonna bring the Enterprise into it at some point. With somebody we know, whether that's Geordi or Data or somebody. There's got to be an Enterprise in it. They can't.
I would agree, absolutely, man. No,
because if you were doing 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if you're doing a Shatner-led Star Trek show and there wasn't an Enterprise in it, you would tear down the networks, wouldn't you?
100%, man. Well, and also those Shatner novels that he wrote about his story. Where the Borg revived his dead body and everything, and they even that planet that the Vulcan, Romulan, Klingon hybrid woman gets him to protect. They buy the Enterprise and they refit it with different weapons and stuff. But he's back in the chair, and it's like, yeah, man, of course he is.
So there is no way that Picard show does not end with Picard in the chair of an Enterprise. You can't. You have to.
That's so funny, man. I'm sure you've seen on Nemesis the alternate ending where he meets his new first officer. And it's, man, I'll tell you, Stuart Baird is I'm sure, a great film editor, but man, he really was the wrong...
Yeah, but not a great editor, no. Not a great director.
He was the wrong guy for Nemesis, because all you have to do is watch all those cut scenes and his commentary about the cut scenes. And he's like, yeah, you see this part? You don't really need it. You don't really need it. And it's like, no, as a Star Trek fan, you absolutely need it. And it would have been so much better and also a lighter note to have it end with Picard meeting his new first officer and Riker, Riker messing with him and stuff. So,
Because I think, this is the thing, is that at that point, Star Trek was purely a fan show. It was showed with people like what's his name, Rick. The guy in charge at the time, Berman. Yeah, Rick Berman. He acknowledged the fact that they were making those films for the fans. So you think, if you're not doing as a director, giving the fans something. It's not necessarily what they want, but certainly giving them something that they need.
Or hook into.
Then you're doing something wrong. And you can't just do it like a partial false equivalence of Star Trek 2 and then not give them a bit of fan service as well, because that's essentially the audience. It was hugely the audience at the time. It was never going to be an outbreak. And I still maintain, I don't know that the movies are ever going to be. I don't think we'll see another Star Trek movie for a long time, because I think the TV shows are doing what the movies couldn't, and they're reaching a broader audience, and they're doing it so well, and they're doing all the fan service stuff, and they're still pushing out a show which can appeal to new people, because I've got kids who are not Star Trek fans, and yet they're watching those Star Trek shows and loving them. You kind of have to think that as good as JJ was, at least initially, in broadening the audience for the first Star Trek movie, that audience contracted in the second two, and I think the TV show, I think Star Trek honestly belongs on TV.
I agree with you. Now, as much as I've loved the Next Gen and original series films, and even the clunky ones, even 5 and 3 of the original series.
Yeah, long-form storytelling works so much better for that material.
I agree with that as well. No, man, again, I won't make you sit through my haranguing of Discovery. I've made you do that before.
We've done that. We have harangued each other on Discovery,
and it's all good, man. That's cool. And again, I am intrigued and happy to talk about it with people I haven't talked about it before, to get their opinions and stuff. But it's But
honestly, this is such a golden age for genre television. I mean, we've got Star Trek, we've got the Arrowverse, and I would lay, whether it's Brandon Routh or Tyler Hoechlin, I would lay money on a Superman show coming out of the Arrowverse.
I hope you're right, man. I really do, because I think that's the smart move. Go on, yeah.
Well, I mean, why not? You can't, as we said, because of Michael Hewson, you cannot do a Batman TV show, but you can do Superman. So why not do Superman? And Crisis is bringing those planets down, so we could have any Superman you pick. It could be, it won't be, but you could everything from Nick Cage to Tom Welling doing Superman on an Arrowverse show following Crisis. Sure. So why not? But Star Trek has found this, this new audience, and the production values are breathtakingly good.
Yes.
And my kids are lapping this stuff up. So, I love the fact that for genre television, and what's coming from Marvel. Look at all that stuff that's coming from Marvel. From the Marvel Universe stuff. All the TV shows based around the movies, and that will lead into the movies, because the WandaVision show is going to lead directly into the next Doctor Strange movie, and there's all the speculation about what that might lead to with Scarlet Witch becoming something more powerful, and not necessarily one of the good guys. My kids are lapping this material up online constantly. That my 12-year-old sits in front of the TV before he's going to school and he's having his breakfast, and just watches YouTube videos of people discussing what's next for the Marvel Universe. He adores this material. And there's a show he watches where there's this guy who just tries to create for real the visual effects of the powers of the Marvel superheroes. He's just like he made himself his orb of Agamotto with a nice stuff, and he got these, you know, those kind of bars that spin really fast that create holograms in real time. He created a couple of those that he could hold in each hand, so he could create the Doctor Strange hologram magic spells around his. Yeah, and he built himself the costume, and he built himself a device that looks like he's like floating along the ground cross-legged. And my kids are lapping this stuff up, and you think, you know, we had Superman 3 and 4.
Yes, Nuclear Man.
I know,
man. Exactly. What are you going to do? You know, as I told you, my buddy Art Baltazar, and actually I guess Ibrahim Mustafa, another artist, can make, not that they're saying Superman 4 was a good movie at all, but there are a lot of good things in Superman 4 in terms of a lot of good Clark stuff. I love his stuff with Mariel, or I forget which Hemingway it was. I think it was Mariel.
Hemingway. It was Mariel Hemingway,
and,
yeah.
You know, you know, back at the farm, he's selling the farm, sadly, and, you know, and so it had the right beats of a Superman movie, but unfortunately it was, you know, the cannons, and those guys.
Globus,
yeah, I mean, good Lord, Electric Boogaloo, that documentary about Cannon Films, so great. And yeah, man, they were Schlockmeisters. I mean, they're the Roger Cormans of the 80s.
I know when you read, you know, the initial material that people came up with along with Chris Reeve about what they wanted to say about the character, you think, actually, yeah, that's great. That's a great foundation for something. Unfortunately, it was Golem Globus, and it was lots of reuse of existing footage, you know. So, and it was shot in fucking Milton Keynes, which is north of London. It's honestly, with apologies to anybody who might be listening from Milton Keynes, it is a ghastly town. It is not Metropolis. Even with the benefit of special effects, Milton Keynes will never be Metropolis.
You're killing me. That's
ever.
Hilarious.
Sam
Wanamaker, an excellent character actor, is
absolutely. Father of Zoe Wanamaker, of course.
Indeed. Absolutely. A Chicago guy, I should point out as well.
And of course, founder of the amazing Globe Theatre in London.
You know, I always forget I always forget about his. That's excellent. That's fantastic. No, he was black, and I'm assuming that's why he was blacklisted here. I think during the 50s and stuff, and had to, you know, come back as he did in the 70s and 80s. But tremendous actor, and again, a Chicago guy. So that's one of the reasons why it's like, oh, hey, man, we're proud of him.
Yeah, well, he should be. Fabulous actor, and obviously what he gave back to the industry is, you know,
that's
fantastic.
Excellent. Yeah, man, very, very cool. All right, go to bed. I feel bad. Unless I got you all teed up talking about Picard.
No. My week is sleep free. I think.
It's
for one reason or another. It's just all over the place this week with colds, migraines, and work combinations. It's bananas, honestly. I will go and relax. I will go and watch something, probably superhero related.
Very good. Very good.
Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and email Mark Guggenheim and say, look, give me a bloody Superman show.
Yeah, you may as well, man. I think this is his last cup of coffee with the DC WB or CW shows. I think this is his last hurrah. And you know, he's got Carnival Run, obviously the new show that's doing quite well.
I know, and I just watched the pilot for that last night. I haven't seen the rest of the show yet, but I'm going to watch some more of it this week.
He's brilliant, honestly. He's a great comic book writer, and he's a great television and film writer. And I wish him nothing but the best. He's excellent, and I'm glad he's going out on this thing because I know, again, last year we hung out, and he was very excited about what was coming this year with the crossover.
I know, honestly, when you think of the guy who put together the Arrowverse, which started with no powers, no superheroes, no supervillains. We're not even going to call him Green Arrow.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. And then you balloon it into this, and then you end it on the Crisis on Infinite Earths. I mean, it's about as far from your start point as possible. You know, really, in terms of what you
totally
said the Green Arrow was going to be, and then now what it's ultimately become. But what a fabulous thing to go out on.
100%,
honestly,
man. Absolutely agree. And dude, honestly, as I said, for people who haven't picked it up, you got to read this You're the Villain Lex Luthor one-shot by Bryan and Jason Latour. And again, coming out this coming Wednesday, it's going to be Batman Grave. The Authority team is back of Ellis and Hitch.
And honestly, for anybody who thinks Batman's Grave is going to be relatively low-key, yes, individually, issue upon issue, there is action, but I can tell you, in terms of the way I know this story is developing, and I know the way this whole 12-issue series is going to be, it is a genuinely epic Batman story, and I think this one is going to be one of those ones that just stays in print, in hardcover or softcover for decades, because it's a brilliant idea, and Warren's just executing it really well, chapter on chapter on chapter. It just the growth of story is just lovely. I'm enjoying the shit out of it.
Excellent, man. That's great. And again, the first issue blew me away. And I meant to say this earlier.
Glad.
Back in the 90s when they would do Legends of the Dark Knight, that was really always a lot of times my favorite series, because you would get these great out-of-continuity stories.
Yeah, Batman Gothic, all that stuff.
Well, even, and I can't remember, and again, I can't even remember if he was an artist or writer, but John Higgins did this, and I forget who his collaborator was, but it was an all-British team doing a great Batman story, and it's like...
That's probably that was probably John Wagner, not John Higgins.
Oh, and you might be right. Yeah, it probably was. As you know, and man, I have yet to talk to John Wagner. I did finally get to talk to Pat Mills a couple times, and that was a thrill. But yeah, John Wagner's such a great Batman writer. But man, again, maybe Higgins was the artist. I don't know. Or is he a letterer or something? I misremember.
Higgins is certainly an accomplished artist, but he also he was the colorist on the original Watchmen and Dark Knight and other things.
And that's why I think visually, I think it might have been Higgins that drew it. But it was great. And again, I love when people like yourselves that are not Americans are writing Batman, because I do think you guys bring a different perspective and think about the characters in ways that maybe we take for granted. I always say that to James Robinson, another great Batman writer, when he gets the chance. And it's, and I mean it. It's like it's always interesting stuff. And Alan Grant as well, doing his stuff in the 90s with Norm Breyfogle.
Well, I think what you get is you get a slightly skewed, a looking glass kind of appreciation of the character, and I think certainly in terms of the way we approach it as artists or writers, it's never quite American, because of course we aren't American. So even though we share a lot of common ground, a lot of common influences and common backgrounds, it isn't 100% the same. So I always think there is a slightly different flavour to it when you have a completely British team on something, whether that's writer-artist or whatnot. But in this case, it of course is a British writer, British artist. We're not trying to write Batman as British, but there is certainly an additional kind of element, flavour or edge to the character that isn't quite as wholly American as Tom King and Lee Weeks, as awesome as they are. You have to expect a slightly different flavour, because our cultural background is, at least in part, different. I mean, we've all watched Cagney and Lacey. We all love Cagney and Lacey, but at the same time, we've also had Deal and Pascoe over here. So, and that's a complete bizarre reference to anybody who isn't English. Nobody outside of there will actually get that reference whatsoever. But the point being is that our British cop shows aren't the same as the American cop shows. The pacing is different, the tone is different, the culture is different, and I think that can't help but be true for comic books too. Which is why I suppose when you get people like me and Warren doing The Authority, is that it's a different take on a kind of mainstream action-led group or team comics. It can't help but be different, because we aren't doing Jerry Conway and Dick Dillon books. And we've read those books, but at the same time we've read them in the context of being part of a different culture.
Yeah.
So I always think that when you get people like Mark Miller and Frank Quitely and currently, I think, and it's worth a huge mention, Grant Morrison, Liam Sharp on the Green Lantern. The tone is different and slightly just off what you expect because, their cultural background is different and their interests are different and their references are different. And as much as they've absorbed all the American culture and the American comics and we all work in that medium, it isn't 100% the same, and it can't be, and it never will be when you've got a British writer and British artist. And I think, I think that's part of the joy of working in this, is having the freedom to be that way. And Dan, actually, to be fair to Dan, giving us the freedom to do this stuff and not saying you have to be like this book or that series has to be in that continuity or this. It just Dan just saying, you and Warren on Batman is the easiest yes I've given this month. It's I don't care what the story's about. You're on. You're up. So. At the same time, you have to take that with a huge amount of respect. You have to kind of say that he's trusting us to do this, so you have to kind of go off and deliver it now. And Warren certainly is. So of course I have to now. And I just started issue 5 today, actually. So before I started talking to you, I had to draw page 2 of issue 5. And it was very easy because it was entirely a silhouette shot. So it was the quickest page I've drawn of Batman's grave yet.
That's excellent, man. Well, they're all anticipating. Again, you gave me the sneak preview, so at least I'm caught up with issue 1. But it's a great start, and man, I can tell you guys are giving it your all, and it's I'm excited to see the complexity evolve as the subsequent issues come out. So Batman Grave this Wednesday. Look for Lex Luthor in the Year of the Villain one-shot too from Latour and Bryan, and coming variants for Superman into 2020.
Yes,
so
indeed.
That's a nice little laundry list of Bryan Hitch stuff we can all look forward to.
Yes, I'm very happy about that. I've got it's the best case scenario. I'm drawing Batman day on day, and then I get to break it by drawing Superman covers every couple of days, every week or so. So I'm happy. I've got my favourite 2 characters I'm working on for the company that made me want to draw comics in the first place. This is about as good as it gets.
That's great, man. No, and always, as I told you, a pleasure talking to you. When you got time, whenever. Hell, I mean, we can do one more before the end of the year if you want to. But again, when the announcements come out for the new thing and everything, and as
yes, you will definitely need to do something for that, because that's going to be epic when that one. And I'll tell you a bit more about that in a minute when we go off.
No, I appreciate it, man. As always, thank you.
All right, always a pleasure, John.
There we go, a new Bryan Hitch talk in the books. Again, Batman Grave, Lex Luthor, Year of the Villain, some interesting projects along the way that are coming up and might be announced at the end of this year or beginning of next year. Always interested in what Bryan Hitch is doing, interested in his creative process and his pop culture process as well. So it's great to have that great conversation with Bryan from last week, and happy to share with you on today's Word Balloon. I hope you enjoyed it. Brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. If you want to subscribe to Word Balloon, go to patreon.com/wordballoon or click on the Patreon ad on the front page of wordballoon.com. Thank you greatly, League of Word Balloon listeners. And Word Balloon brought to you by Aftershock Comics. It's been a year since Aftershock started sponsoring Word Balloon, and it's greatly appreciated. Wow, our year anniversary. I was just telling Steve Rotterdam about that on the phone, and he was laughing. And I'm like, hey, thank you. My God. Great support, man. And in fact, I guess in Aftershock Comics, you'll find a Word Balloon ad in the October books. So that's pretty cool, too. So whether it's Animosity from Marguerite Bennett, or Dark Red from Tim Seeley, or Stronghold from Phil Hester and Ryan Kelly, and, other books like Matthew Klickstein's You Are Obsolete, and, great stuff from Chris Sabella and Stephanie Phillips, and so many other wonderful Aftershock creators. They got great books, man. I'll tell you, and it's I appreciate the work that Mike Martz and Joe Pruitt have done putting together these creators and saying yes to some really interesting genre-bending concepts. So check it out for yourself. Go to their website. You'll find full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on their books, and how to order them through your local shop at aftershockcomics.com. Thanks a lot for listening. More great stuff coming in October. I've already got a couple new interviews in the books, and I will continue to have these great conversations. It's a very interesting time. The CW shows are getting underway. The short treks are going to start this week on Thursday, leading up to Star Trek Picard. Very excited about that. Of course, Joker has hit the theaters. And as much as I said in the last episode that I have my problems with the movie, I can't deny that the movie did enough interesting things that it has already sparked interesting conversations casually with my friends, but also even Hailey Kennedy, who is working on Orphan Black, the audio sequel at Serial Box. We have a great conversation coming up this week on Word Balloon. And just casually, I'm like, hey, have you seen Joker? And she's like, yes, I have. And all of a sudden, we broke into a nice, meaty discussion that was a little more revealing in terms of plot. I think we stay on the right side, and you're not really told much, and there's still enough mystery for you to see if you haven't seen Joker yet. As I said, I will have a spoiler-heavy Joker conversation in the days ahead as well, because I think it's worth talking about. And I do think, while it's a movie that is not going to be universally loved, it's already doing well. It made over $200 million internationally its first weekend. And I smell a sequel. I could be wrong. And I know people are like, oh, no way, this is a one-shot. Joaquin Phoenix doesn't do sequels. You know, I keep saying the actors that are afraid of getting involved in a franchise, that's an Adam West problem. And all apologies to Adam West for using him as an example. But the fear of being typecast, I think, went away in the 21st century. I think Tobey Maguire, despite doing 3 Spider-Man movies for Sam Raimi, was still able to do very interesting movies regardless. I think Robert Downey Jr. has... There's my cough again. I think Robert Downey Jr. has proved that. I think Christian Bale has proved that. You're not going to be typecast. All you're going to do is make a pile of money, and in fact, if you've got a passion project, maybe you can use some of that franchise money to make films that you really want to make. You know, that kind of thing. Hell, that goes back to Sean Connery when they coaxed him to come back for Diamonds Are Forever. And he's like, I'll do it under 2 conditions. And he got them to deposit $5 million in the Bank of Scotland and help it get running. And then he really wanted to make this very dark police movie called The Offense that every studio was afraid of. But United Artists really needed him to come back as James Bond. And they're like, okay, man, we'll make your passion project. You know, God, Emilio Estevez did that back in the day with the Mighty Ducks movies and got to make some indie movies that he wouldn't have done had it not been that. So as far as Joaquin Phoenix reprising his role as Joker, he's already on the record saying he wouldn't mind exploring the character further. And I would be very interested in a Joker Chapter 2 and see where they go. And I'll leave it at that, but I'll talk more about it in my spoiler conversation about Joker coming up on Word Balloon in the days ahead. So look forward to that. Look forward to Hailey Kennedy talking about the new Orphan Black. She also did 2 arcs at IDW of Orphan Black comics and stuff. Orphan Black's a great sci-fi series. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. My God. Tatiana, and I always forget how to say her last name, but the woman that plays Sarah and all the clones. I mean, honestly, man, this is like high-bred, whether it's Katharine Hepburn or, God, now I'm blanking, who always gets nominated for Oscars. I can't think of her name right now. You're all like screaming it right now, and I appreciate it, but it's pretty early in the morning right now when I'm putting this thing out. But really, to play all those different clones and do them so successfully and really create individual characters in each iteration, blown away. Tatiana Maslany, perhaps, isn't that her name? Glenn Close is a great actor, of course, that I can think of right now, but that wasn't the name I'm thinking of. I know, you're all yelling it at me, and I'm sure in 2 hours I'll be like, of course I was thinking of so-and-so. Why am I so stupid? I see her in my head right now. You all do too. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's Word Balloon, and really looking forward to this Orphan Black conversation that even slides into some Joker territory as well with Hailey Kennedy. Until then, thanks for listening. Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions. Copyright 2019.